How do you deal with tough communication situations at work? Be it when someone keeps interrupting you when you speak, or when your team member keeps going off on a tangent, or when you as a leader need to implement a change but your team members keep resisting and pushing against it. Do you want more peace of mind and clarity in navigating these situations? If yes, then join us for this special compilation episode of The Art and Science of Difficult Conversations, where we feature these three scenarios and offer you some key strategies to handle them. Now sit back and enjoy.
Welcome back to the Art and Science of Difficult Conversations, where I'm one of your hosts, Chris. Thank you for joining us. And we really truly believe if we communicate better, we live better. As always, I'm not alone. I'm here with Lucy. Lucy,
I'm
how are
here
you
too.
today?
I'm good. Thank you, Chris. It's early morning for me. Still dark outside.
Yeah.
How are you
It's
doing today?
it's good, good. It's a nice day. It's not too hot, which I appreciate. It's a nice fall, like cool day.
Nice. Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's always interesting managing our times because you're on the West Coast, so it's just
Mm,
trying to
yeah.
figure out what time works best for everybody.
It is what it is.
Yeah. Um, yeah, my son just had his third birthday party
Oh,
on
happy
Saturday, so it was nice.
birthday to him.
Thanks.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, so it was a nice little get together. It was raining all day, so we had to pivot. We
Oh
were going to do it in our
no.
backyard, and then we had to pivot into using another space
Hmm.
because our house isn't big enough to hold that many people. So,
Wow,
but it was
that's
good.
the nice. Good for you. Sounds like you created some innovation there and quick
Yeah.
thinking.
Yeah. So today is just us. We're just talking with each other. But we have one big thing that I've seen a couple of times now. And it's interesting because it's on both sides. So it's really
Mm.
how do I deal with interruption? Or if it's personal, how do I stop interrupting other people when I'm trying to talk? And so we'll do that first part. We'll do that first part of how do I stop interrupting other people when I'm talking to them? How do I let them talk? And so when you think about that, what gets in the way? Why do people feel the need to interrupt and jump in?
That's a great question, Chris. So there might be different reasons. I would say one of them that may happen sometimes for me. I hear an idea and I get an idea and I don't want to forget it. And that's why
Mm,
I try to interrupt because you just said something. So that's one possibility that
hmm
we are the person that is interrupting is somebody that is creative and has lots of ideas and they want to share something that came up for them.
hmm
I'm also thinking another reason could be the other person said something triggering
hmm
and therefore the other person wants to interrupt because they are reacting from, okay, let's say anger, upset, rather than letting the other person finish. They want to set the record straight, maybe
hmm
right
hmm
there.
Yeah.
Any other scenario that comes up for you, Chris?
I'm thinking, and I think when I say this, it'll be interpreted as a negative thing. I think sometimes people have the need to show that they know what's going on, or they feel like they have to show an expertise or how to solve a problem. And I truly don't mean that in a bad way. I truly mean a lot of leaders get into a position, especially for leaders, they get into a position where they were promoted or gotten hired because they know what they're doing. And now they feel like they have to prove that in a way. So they feel like that inner anxiety, like I have to show you that I know what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And the downside is then you feel like you need to answer the problem, but you haven't done enough asking or you haven't let the other person talk enough to figure out if that's the actual problem or if it's just they're talking out the problem out loud and they know how to solve it. They just need to verbally process it. So I've seen that as well. Just that inner anxiety, like I need to prove that I know what I'm talking about.
Mm, makes sense. And I'm hearing, so I've mentioned, let's say, being triggered, being upset, but you're mentioning another emotion, like the inner anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Like we have to show we know. I wonder if it's also part of like I want to control the situation or the conversation when it's going.
I mean, that's part of it too, right? That anxiety of I
Mm-hmm.
don't want this to
Yeah.
go into talking about really difficult things, or I
Yeah.
don't want this to go off the rails and people start fighting me on stuff or pushing back
Mm.
and asking me questions that I really don't know the answer to. So let me control
Yeah.
the narrative into something that I know how to manage.
Makes sense.
Um, but that's not really the best way to facilitate a discussion.
Mm-hmm. That's true. When we look at, okay, so what is the intention of the discussion? If that's creative problem solving,
Hmm.
mm, that behavior is going to stand in the way of that.
Right. Right. So yeah. So if from when you've coached other people and yourself, I guess also, how do you teach others and yourself to not interrupt?
Great question. I would say first step is self-awareness and just being aware of how much we do it whenever we do that. One of the strategies that has worked for me is um, having a piece of paper or a file on my computer. And whenever I get an idea, then the other person, while the other person is talking, just write a note for myself. So then I don't have to interrupt. I still keep that idea and I can continue listening. And then once the person is finished, then I can look at, my notes and see, okay, these are the things that came up for me. Um,
Hmm.
so that's the strategy for those people that have lots of ideas coming up as
Yeah.
they are listening. What would be some of the strategies? What would you say for somebody that is anxious?
I would I'd say it's just one of those things that takes a long time.
Mm,
I think for it's something that I've experienced as a coach and as a therapist. Like there's a lot of times when somebody's saying some kind of issue or problem, and you're like, I know how to solve it. It's a very simple. I just want to tell you the answer. I wish I could just tell you the answer. And you feel like this pressure building up inside you. I need to tell you this answer. I need to tell you what's going on. You know what helps me and what I tell other people is sometimes finding something physical to push or touch
oh
to as a
yeah.
grounding tool. So like holding a one person I've worked with had a sharp rock, not a sharp rock, but it was like a rock that had like a ridges on it. Yeah, exactly, just like that. But something where the more you feel like you need that you feel your body, your
Yeah.
heart rate's rising, you're getting heated, you want to say something, whether positive, negative, or neutral, you just want to say something. And so I say just hold on to that and press it. The more you feel that pressure to say something, just press into that and then
Hmm.
just keep listening. And so doing that, and then I will just take a deep breath as they're talking. And the more contentious it is, the more I'll try to not do it visibly. Otherwise, they'll think I'm being upset at them.
Mm, yeah.
So really, it's just me trying to calm myself down. So I'll take a deep breath. That helps me just
Makes
slow
sense.
down, calm everything down, and focus on what they're trying to say.
I love the strategy. So really about kind of self-leadership, noticing whenever we are in that state
Mm-hmm.
and calming down ourselves down, be it with the object that we hold, be it pen or rock or a cup of something, and taking a sip or taking a deep breath, maybe
Mm-hmm.
even into the stomach rather than into the chest, which can
Yeah.
be even more grounding, or just feeling the chair underneath us, the ground underneath us, and really focus on self-regulating rather than jumping in
Yeah.
and letting the emotions take
Right. Right.
control of our reactions.
But your point is right also. I think self-awareness is where it starts.
Mhm.
You have to know what the signs are. You have to know why you are doing it to a degree. You may not know
Yeah.
right away, but you have to kind of have a sense of I'm feeling like I want to say something so you can start catching yourself
Yeah.
and start thinking about what's going on here? Why can't I just listen?
Mhm. When you are mentioning listening, I'm also thinking the way of listening. How are we listening? If that also
Mm-hmm.
has an impact on how we are interacting. So there's the way some people listen to respond, And
Yep.
some people listen to understand. And so are we
Yep.
listening to understand, or are we listening again to make a point to win the discussion, which can come more from the anxious, fearful state rather than the
Yeah.
curiosity and desire to collaborate something or problem solve.
And I think that's a technique that really changed and made me feel more comfortable in hard conversations of any sort is that mindset of let me just understand what you're thinking, feeling. Because I think for a lot of therapists in grad school, I had a lot of classmates that were, uh, for lack of a better word, just anxious about when a patient says this or a client says this, what do I say in response? Or what questions should I ask? They essentially kind of wanted a script of like, if the client says this, say this. They wanted like a real workflow of what to say.
Oh, yeah. Hmm.
And I think, and I teach also, is like once what really helps you is just listen to what they're feeling and focus on that and try to figure out what is it that they're feeling or thinking about a situation. And then that'll the question or the next thing to say will come up naturally as you focus more on that. Focus on that. Don't worry about what's going to happen next. Just focus on that question or focus on what they're saying, what they're confused about, what they're struggling with, and that'll work itself out. Because I think for, interrupting, somebody may bring up like, if you have like if you're my employee and when you're complaining to me, you bring up like 4 or 5 different issues. I'm gonna feel that anxiety, like I don't want to forget that first issue. I don't, because you brought it up and then you changed topic. I want to, like, I have an answer for that. I know how to solve that. And the more I think about like how do I solve that, what do I say that first problem, the more I'm focusing on like the content when I really should be thinking about you keep changing the subject. So what's going on here that you are so all over the place? It seems like you have a lot. It seems like you're overwhelmed. It seems like you're overburdened and overstressed. And
Hmm.
what's the most important to you? Let's let you decide. What do you think is the most important? And let's solve that problem one at a time.
Makes sense. So I'm hearing also maybe setting some ground rules, even possibly. Could we just pause after each point? Or having
Yeah.
like, do you want to share just everything at once, or do you want to go point by point?
Right. Yeah, because I think it's up to the your employee. Because I think we want as managers, as leaders, we want to solve the problem because we're good at it. That's why we're leaders. That's why people get promoted because we're good at solving a problem. And really, the employee may not even need our help. They just need to talk it out loud and hear it out loud. And then the more they talk about it, they can figure it out themselves. They realize, oh, this is the issue.
Absolutely.
Or the more they talk about it out loud, they're like, actually, I don't need your help with that. I can figure that out. I need your help with this other thing.
Hmm. So sometimes people don't need the solution; they just need to um, kind of share that to somebody else and get their own clarity as they're describing the situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that comes
So
with
it's,
curiosity of the leader.
yep.
How can I support this person? Is it by telling them what I think? Or is it by really listening to what they're saying and helping them think it through by
Mm-hmm.
asking questions rather than telling them what I'm thinking?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What do you suggest usually or do when you do have somebody that's like kind of going all over the place and you have thoughts about everything they've said?
So usually I reflect back. So I'm hearing there's a lot of things going on. I'm hearing these things. So maybe one, two, three, four different things. What is the most important thing you would like to address today in our time together?
But yeah,
And help them basically pick what they want to focus on.
right, right. So similar
If we have,
approach.
yeah.
So similar approach. Like let's really just listen and look at the big process of what's happening that you're going from thing to thing. I don't
Hmm.
need to jump in and feel like I have to answer every single thing right away.
No.
Absolutely. So that's good. So then that's very straightforward, simple, not easy, but simple to understand in terms of just got to be aware of yourself, aware of why you're to a degree, why you feel a need to interrupt, and then have strategies in place to slow yourself down and listen to what's happening in the other person and being curious.
There's one last thing that came up for me around when somebody gets
Mm,
triggered, let's say
mm,
angry or upset. Again, I would say similar with the anxiety. Use our body sensations to help us calm down. Hold the rock, put that pressure into that rock, into that stress ball or anything that you have, or feel the ground underneath. Could be sometimes just muting ourselves as another
Mm.
strategy, let's say on the call.
Hmm. Hmm.
If it's not video, or I don't know how that would work possibly on the video. So we make sure that we let the other person speak. Could be a possible
Yeah.
kind of workaround. So we know, yes, I know I'm getting triggered. I'm gonna focus. I'm gonna write notes, and I'm gonna mute myself so I'm not making noises of disapproval. Maybe.
Mm. Hmm.
What do you think
Hmm.
of this strategy?
I like it. I think it works well online.
Mm,
Obviously, it doesn't translate to in person, but yeah,
yeah, true.
online, why not?
True. Yeah, in person is a little bit more harder to mute ourselves.
Yeah, that's a good one. I'll start using that. I'm going to start suggesting that one.
I've used it once with my mom actually.
Oh yeah, on the phone. On the
Yes, on
phone
the
would work
phone.
too.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep, yeah. Um, I feel like I may have used that before too on the phone. That sounds familiar,
It's
but that's not a
easier.
bad idea. You don't interrupt, and you can just let the other person just kind of rant or do whatever they need to
Yep.
do for
Yep.
whatever. I love that. So why don't we take a break here and when we come back, why don't we talk about the other side? How do we deal with a coworker or somebody else that keeps interrupting us? How do we that constantly interrupts us?
Sounds good. So here's
Blah
a
blah
little
blah. Add
commercial.
commercial here. Blah blah blah.
Yes.
Okay.
I just noticed that's for
What?
later. You're kind of dark today. It seemed like the
Dark?
light.
Um.
Ah,
Oh
uh-huh. Now you
yes,
changed something. Uh-huh. Now it's darker.
yes. I
Now it's
am darker
lighter.
because I don't have the light with me. I'm not at my regular desk. If you haven't noticed.
I You didn't
um.
say.
So what I'm gonna do is I actually have
I mean,
a
it's
Reddit
okay.
post. I'll what I'll do is I'll read it
Oh,
so that it'll have like more concrete
I
in
like
terms of
it.
what specific thing. And then we can even role play what we could say in the situation.
Okay.
So that make it easier. So hey, Chris here. I really appreciate you listening to this podcast. And if you are listening to this podcast because you're looking to get better at these difficult conversations, well, if you really want to de escalate difficult behaviors and you want to be assertive without being aggressive and being true to yourself, I have a self paced course that can really help you because I know it's difficult being assertive in lots of different situations. If you're at work and you have to give feedback, if you have to deliver bad news to an employee, or deliver bad news to somebody that you care about in your personal life, or you're struggling to deal with defensive or sensitive people who are pushing your buttons and you don't know how to push back. You know, it doesn't have to be that way. There is a world where you can handle these tough emotions with confidence. You can speak honestly and kindly while you're still being assertive. And you have the ability to manage emotional outbursts and stubbornness calmly, because these are things that I've had to overcome and learn. And so this self-paced course goes through all of those things. I've created this trust framework that helps you think through how to prepare for and how to facilitate hard conversations. And you hear a lot of it actually in this podcast as I talk about how to handle difficult conversations in lots of different scenarios. Currently, the course is closed for enrollment. There's a waiting list. If you are interested in learning more, enrollment will open up at the end of August and the beginning of September. So please go to the website. I'll link it down below and you can learn more about it and join the waiting list if you want to hear more about it. But I'd love to see you there. All right. Lucy, are you ready to hear this scenario?
Yeah, I want to hear it. I'm curious.
So this is from Reddit. And so the post is really, how do you deal with a coworker who constantly interrupts you? So there's a coworker, the poster, the original poster. They have this coworker they're calling them Jen, who constantly interrupts me during meetings. Sometimes it's positive and productive. However, most of the time, They just cram in whatever thought they have in the middle of my talking. Worst of all, they're usually wrong and they talk for a very long time. For example, our company's going through some layoffs. When I was talking to a point related to accounting and the changing structure of salaries, Jen randomly started talking about how bad layoffs are and how we should be mindful and caring to our colleagues. Sure, they're not totally wrong, but that monologue was totally non productive. And I get that sometimes people are excited and want to share their thoughts, but it feels disrespectful. And this person, the poster, has tried pausing, giving them a look, but they don't seem to catch on. They've also tried saying stuff like, as I was saying before, to get back on point when they do stop talk, when Jen stops talking, but they're completely oblivious to the slight social cues. What do you think? How would you address a coworker who's constantly interrupting you in meetings?
Hmm. That's a good one. Great scenario. So different things come to mind. One, I wonder if that person had a conversation with Jen outside of the meeting and giving them
Hmm.
feedback. I'm noticing that in some of the meetings that we have had, it seems when I'm talking, you jump in, and sometimes it is productive, and I appreciate your input. And at the same
Yeah.
time, I lose my train of thought. And it also feels like the impact on me, it feels like you're not listening to what I'm saying, and I feel a little bit
Hmm.
disrespected. And here could be a request, next time when we are in the meeting, I want to hear what you're thinking, but could you please let me finish first?
Hmm.
And kind of
Hmm.
set kind of the agreement there. That could be one
Yeah.
of the possibilities that comes up for me.
Hmm.
Um, what would you say? Any other way?
I agree. I think the first step would be I think this person's tried things in the meeting. I actually don't think there are wrong things to try. I think it's reasonable to try those things.
Mhm.
I do think talking to this person, Jen, one on one would make the most sense to talk and figure out what's going on because there could be lots of reasons. Jen just could be really excited or passionate about whatever topic it
Yeah.
is. Um, to me, I also wonder, do they have some type of ADHD, some type of just kind of lack of internal control to stop themselves from saying it because they're just thinking it, and maybe they haven't been diagnosed previously, so now they're like they haven't been treated or helped with it, so now they're just kind of in there and nobody's giving them that feedback, so they're not getting any kind of uh, guidance on what they need to correct and how to correct it. Right, they're just super excited about this topic, or they're
Yeah.
just super thinking about something and they need to get it off their chest. So part of that, I think, is giving that feedback, but also figuring
Mm-hmm.
out what's going on for that person.
Mm. Yeah.
Not that you have to solve it, right? If it's your coworker and if it's a personal issue, it's not your job to solve it. You don't have to worry
Sure.
about that.
Yeah.
Even if you're the boss, I guess it's not your job to solve their personal issues. But I would say you should understanding that helps you better understand why it's happening. So you know what type of feedback you need to give, whether it's you just need to direct them and guide them and give them some actionable feedback because they haven't had that guidance before. Giving that feedback
Mm.
exactly as you said, right? What the impact is and what you want different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just give that feedback and talk it through and figure out, do they want ongoing support and guidance around it. So you just keep telling them stuff like, hey, great job in the last meeting. Thank you for letting me finish my thought.
Makes sense. Yeah. Give even
You
the
know,
positive feedback after, actually. Yeah.
right, right, right. So then, what about in the meeting? What would you do in the meeting? Let's say before you even had a chance to talk to her one on one. How would you address it in the meeting?
That's a great question. And I'm hearing, from the Reddit contributor that they've tried the nonverbal signs, they've tried giving the look, nothing
Yeah,
worked. I also, or they tried, okay, so as I said earlier,
yeah.
uh, and here's an idea. When I hear this, I didn't hear, what I like about your point is this. And I really would like our meeting today to focus on that. And yes, I really appreciate that we do need to show empathy. It is a difficult time for the employees, for everybody here. And let's focus today on this topic, and how about we address this in our next meeting? How to handle these difficult conversations with our team as they're going through the waves of uncertainty and anxiety. Probably, how do we deal with this
Hmm.
emotional part of this transformation or change?
Yeah.
But let's today focus on the practical things, kind of acknowledging what they said, validating their perspective, and at the same time creating the container for today's discussion. Going back to that,
Mm.
one of the strategies. What would you say? Anything else comes up for you around like in the meeting?
Yeah, in the meeting, I would have two thoughts. I like yours approach as well. I think that works. And the only two approaches I have would be say, hang on, can I just finish my thought? And then just do your thought, say whatever it is, answer your
Yeah,
question, or do the whatever you need to
yeah,
present.
makes sense.
The second one is if they really do say something and they don't let you even jump in, they finish their thought, even if it's long, long discussion. Just you could say your parlay. Let's talk about it next time, or you could also say, you know, Jen, I apologize. Like I think that's a really good point. I'm just trying to understand how it fits into what we're talking about.
Mm,
I would ask them to link it to why it was part of
nice.
this discussion and
Mm,
then see if they because like in my mind I'm thinking if they can link it back and it really does make a good point and I just didn't see the link, then maybe it's worth talking about. Let's talk about that.
I love that.
However, it could also serve as like a gentle nudge, like, is there a real link to why we're talking about this without necessarily calling them
Mm,
out?
yeah.
And it's placing me as like, I get it. Maybe I missed something. That's fair
Mm,
on my part.
I love that approach. Well done. Yeah, kind of being still curious and validating and listening. And at the same time, giving them the choice, an opportunity to see, okay, does it link? Is it the right time and place for this to be discussed, or actually not?
Right, right.
I
And they
love
might
that.
say something like, actually, you know what? It is just something I was just thinking about. Like, it doesn't
Yeah,
really
sorry.
mean, it
Yeah.
doesn't link to what you're saying.
Mhm.
You're like, okay, well, listen, if it's important, let's talk about it next time. Or if you want, we can find other spaces to chat
I
about it.
love it. I love it. um I had a thought come up for me as I realize I'm also in a way interrupting sometimes my clients, not by words but by nonverbal.
Hmm.
And a lot of my clients are very focused, or but I breathe very loudly. It's possible when I take a breath in the middle of their sentence, they're like, Lucy, you want to say something? So our conversation today helps me. I need to be careful not to interrupt them in the middle of the sentence unless there's a reason for that.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I have their permission at the beginning already to interrupt whenever, let's say, they're going in circles. And
Hmm.
so when we have that agreement, then I can do that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
sometimes I
Yeah.
also just get excited because so that's also part of my regulation and write it down. Um, so that's my strategy. And just it comes back to the
Hmm.
awareness. So for me, it's not even jumping in verbally, it's more even the nonverbal. And seems like a lot of clients are very observant and present also with my expressions.
Yeah. Got to be careful of that.
Gotta
Your
be careful.
expressions.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's also hard if you're just a coworker. If you're not the boss,
True.
and also if you're not even leading the meeting. Let's say
That can be
somebody
tricky.
asked you a question, you're just
Yeah.
answering a question, and you're like, I'm not in charge of this meeting. I'm just trying to answer a question, just be done with my piece.
Yep.
I don't want to confront you in the middle of this meeting that I'm not in charge of, and like we're just here. I mean, we don't work together very well. We just like kind of tangentially know each other through this meeting, or through some other work. That's what makes it hard to say like I'm going to follow up with you or let's talk about this next time because you may not be in that position.
That's a very great point that you're bringing. And that reminds me of a client that she said, Lucy, I have this situation. This is not my meeting. And it seems the facilitator of the meeting she is not doing such a great job because there's one person that tends to dominate that meeting, and all
Mm,
of us, everybody else, are just more quiet. And how do I deal with the situation?
mm-hmm,
Um, and so she felt really conflicted because
mm,
she really cared also about the other people's opinions rather than just the person's, but also respected the authority of the facilitator and didn't want to overstep the boundary. Also, she was more from Asian culture. So even
ah,
there, it
yeah,
was
yeah,
more challenging, challenging the authority in a way who was the facilitator of the meeting.
yeah,
What's coming up for you? How would
yeah.
you address this situation? Also, when the conflict of, or maybe the culture can get in a way.
I think it's I think it goes back to those same basic techniques we talked about at the beginning. Go go afterwards and talk to them like one on one. Like, hey, listen,
Yeah.
I don't appreciate when you're interrupting me. You know what's going on here.
Yeah.
Especially if you don't like just telling people what to do. If you're very non-confrontational,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that's fine. Just add in another point where you're asking them what's going on.
Mm,
Then you can make it a dialogue, and it's not as not as like you
direct.
just telling them to knock it off.
Would you also go talk to this facilitator of the meeting?
You might depends on how well you know the facilitator. I think
Mm,
that's part of that cultural thing. Like
yeah.
if you are in a super respectful, if you come from a super respectful culture, hierarchy is a big thing. You
Yeah.
don't know the facilitator; it's somebody else's boss or the VP or CEO,
Oh, yeah.
and you're
It'll be
lower on the
very difficult. Mm-hmm.
yeah, you're not going to. If it's your own boss, yeah, maybe you'll go to them and
Makes
talk to them like,
sense.
hey,
Yeah.
listen, Jen keeps interrupting me. I'm not able to get my point across. Is there anything you can do about this?
Mm-hmm.
So that might make more sense if it's your own direct boss.
Yeah. Where you have to build the relationship, the trust, the support.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you're come from a culture where it's super hierarchical and respect, it's going to be harder for you if it's somebody that's even higher on the totem pole
Oh, yeah.
that's
Yeah.
leading the meeting.
Makes sense. Yeah. So it comes back to also the self-awareness. What are my and other people's awareness? What are the relationships?
Yeah,
Uh, who might actually support me in the situation? Is it
yep,
wiser to have the conversation straight with the person, or is it wiser to go to my boss and see if the boss could change a way how they facilitate maybe the meeting? It could be also
yeah,
feedback for the boss if that there's the trust and relationship built in that way.
exactly. Yeah. So Lucy, I wonder if you'd be willing. I want to read some of these responses because I think it'd be interesting to get your take on what some of the advice some of the other people gave this original poster.
Let's do it.
So the first thing somebody said, first thing is ask them what you heard me say. So Jen interrupts me and say, Jen, um, I feel like I may not have been communicating my point clearly. Can you please share what you heard me say? What do you think about that approach?
So what I like about it, it's asking a question. It's putting it back on Jen. And there's a concern I have, depending on personality of Jen. Some people might take it as their defenses could come up because it's a
Yeah.
direct, they could become upset.
That's what I'm thinking. It seems very confrontational.
Yes.
It's like, hey, what did you hear me
Yes,
say?
yes, yes. So it might create more conflict in the meeting, possibly. Yep.
Okay. So we're both not a fan of that one.
No.
What about this other one? I just go silent and end the conversation. The awkwardness of the conversation usually clues them in.
Uh, it's an interesting one. I would say it's somebody that is uncomfortable with sharing directly, and they have more indirect communication approach. And it may work. It's coming from the safety, I would say, but it's not might not be the most effective approach because some people they won't get a clue unless we really have the
Mm,
conversation with them.
yeah.
And I would say it's not the most effective approach, definitely, and it's more of the passive aggressive. if I even can say this one.
Yeah, my concern is that in a meeting, that's not going to work if you're trying to answer a question about something, because somebody else is going to jump in and say something
Absolutely.
or ask you to repeat your answer or do
Yeah.
something. So maybe one on one that might work.
Yes. Good point.
But in a meeting, I feel like that would also not only will the interruption disrupt the flow of the meeting, but then you not saying anything if you're supposed to answer a question or present, then that also breaks the flow of the meeting as well.
True. Plus, there's already negative emotion in there. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, you're upset. What happened? You seem quiet now. Or some people
Yeah.
are uncomfortable to actually say that and they just dismiss it and they just start talking even more. Because for
Mm.
some people, when they get anxious, they start talking even more.
Yeah.
So, which
Yeah.
could actually make the problem even worse, that strategy.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Here's the last one. There's other ones. A lot of people said similar things to us, which is pull them aside, talk to them after the meeting, or just say something during the meeting. Um, this one is if someone interrupts me when I'm trying to say something important, I just keep talking. So just even ignore that they try to interrupt. And if they keep going, say, "Excuse me, could you wait until I'm finished, please?" What do you think about that approach?
So that's so we've seen the passive aggressive, we've seen so it's more on the aggressive side, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And I will wonder what would be the assertive yet respectful to everybody communication. In a way, this communication also is ignoring that they are trying to say something. So I would say it's not ideal situation either. That might also lead to more upset on both
Yeah.
sides and frustration. What's coming
I'll
up for
tell
you
you what.
around this one?
I
Yeah,
actually I actually don't mind the second part where they say, "Excuse me, could you wait until I'm finished?"
true.
I
Good
actually
point.
don't
Yeah.
mind that one. I think that one's reasonable to do,
Mm.
especially if it's a person that consistently interrupts you.
Mm, true.
Now I would pair that with going afterwards to talk to them
Yes.
and say and talk to them and just like figure this out. But I wouldn't suggest just keep talking and ignore what they're doing.
Yeah.
To your point, it's a mix of passive aggressive and just aggressive. So
Hmm.
that necessarily won't help. But I don't hate the idea of just saying, "Hey, could I just finish talking, please?"
That's true. That's more communication of like I'm hearing you have something to say and I want to hear it, but can you please let me finish first?
Right, right. And then, but it depends on tone, right? The way you just said it sounds respectful.
Yeah.
But you could certainly also end up saying it like aggressively.
Just can you let me finish for once?
For once. Uh, Jen, shut up and let me talk. That
so
is not appropriate. That's not what we teach here.
so we need to always remember there are levels to our conversations and communication. There's not just the
Right.
data, what we
Right, right,
actually
right.
communicate, the words, but also the energy we communicate and the emotions we
And
communicate with.
yeah. So, Lucy, what are your takeaways? What are you thinking about in terms of final takeaways of how to deal with a coworker that's constantly interrupting you in this meeting situation?
Hmm. So if it happens for once, twice, really have the conversation with them one on one first. If it happens in the meeting, see respectfully with managing the tone of voice and our emotions. So it comes with our own self-regulation.
Mm-hmm.
So have your rocks ready, or your stress balls,
Yep.
so that when you can say, could you please let me finish first, and then I want to hear what you want to share. And if you are worried that you're going to forget, please just write it down quickly. So then we address your point, but I really want to finish first. So we say it in a tone of voice that is not angry, upset. So both managing ourselves, our energy, our emotions, and communicating our boundary in a way and what we
Mm-hmm.
want instead. Anything else that you would like to add?
Yeah, I don't know if I would add much. I I think it's right on. I think it's reasonable to address it in the moment and then follow up afterwards and make sure you talk about it one on one too. But yeah, I don't think you can if it's keep in this situation, it keeps happening. It's not just a one time thing. So it's worth talking about it one on one
Yeah.
and trying to figure out how are you going to work together to figure this
Hmm.
out.
Hmm. I like what you said. How are we going to work together because this is not working? Rather than you need to change this. This is your fault that our
Right,
communications.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But rather
Exactly. It's
collaborate. Let's both of us figure it out how we can work together better.
exactly how do we solve the problem together as opposed to
Hmm.
you
You have
figure
a
this out.
problem.
Right,
Yes.
right. I mean, you can feel that way in your head. You can,
True.
vent to your friends about it, but when you're
Hmm.
talking to the person, the focus is how do we solve the problem together?
Yeah. So, this is the end of our episode today. Please like, subscribe, let us know your questions. So maybe next time we read your situations rather than from Reddit. And Chris, by the way, I really appreciate what you did here today. Thank you. I think that that was a cool way of doing that rather than just us role playing, because I think we get exposed to different scenarios and even different ways. So please give us feedback if you also like this way, or if you really love the role plays, let us know so we can make it in a way that also works for you. Because this is why we're doing it, to add value to you, to have better communication and have better lives. Well, thank you, Chris,
Thank you,
for
Lucy. Always a
another awesome
pleasure.
episode. Same here. And I look forward to seeing you next time.
Yeah. See you next time. Bye, all.
Bye.
Hey, welcome everybody. Welcome back to our next episode of The Art and Science of Difficult Conversations. I am here with my co-host Lucy. Lucy, how are you today?
I'm good, Chris. Thank you. How are you doing today?
So far, so good. Here in Boston, our the weather is finally not humid. It's still warm, but
Oh,
it's okay without the humidity. It's bearable. You can go outside and do things. You can live life, enjoy the sun. So much better.
nice. Yeah, I was just recently traveling to the East Coast from the West Coast, and that was one of the things that surprised me how humid it was. And I was missing the dry heat in California.
Yeah, it's miserable. Yeah, it's miserable. Um, but for those of you tuning in, we have this podcast where we talk about difficult conversations about how to have them better because we really believe when we communicate better, we live better. And I was just having this conversation with somebody because I'm doing a workshop for them in a couple of weeks on difficult conversations and conflict resolution. And one of the participants is conflict avoidant, but she agrees and she knows that in her heart of hearts that having difficult conversations leads to better outcomes and everybody will be happier if they can just do this, but she's just worried about having them. She just doesn't like having them, and a lot of other people are also not having them and that's why I'm going in.
Hmm. Yeah, it is difficult. That's why they are difficult, because it's not easy to get into them. And we are hoping that through our conversations, we'll make it a little bit easier for you.
Yeah, and so today, that's why one of the things we wanted to bring up today was a scenario of what do you do when somebody goes on tangents in hard conversations, because what makes it hard is number one, you have to bring it up, but also when people are thinking about it and getting anxious about bringing up a topic, they're worried about the other person going on a tangent or talk about something else or going on a rant about something. And so, how do I manage that? How do I deal with it? Like, how do I get them back on track in a way that's respectful, but at least I just need to get things done? And so, for you, Lucy, what are your go-to tips? What do people need to do to keep people from going on tangents?
That's a great question, Chris. And I would say first, take time to prepare for the conversation. Just like we are usually saying, we need to take some time and really think about what is our intention for the conversation. What also have an empathy for the other, kind of put ourselves in their shoes. So understand if we know that one of the challenges that could happen, the person goes off tangent. What is their reason? Is it maybe because they are uncomfortable really about talking the topic? Or is there a kind of defense strategy? And also prepare ourselves mentally and emotionally. If the other person does that, what is my strategy? What can I do? I would say, first of all, staying calm, not allowing ourselves to get triggered. You do this all the time. That wouldn't help, probably, in the difficult
Mm-hmm.
conversation. So that's one, our own emotional regulation, preparing ourselves emotionally. If this person does that again, going off tangent, how do I keep myself calm? I will pause here. What would be something you would add? Maybe we can gradually build.
Yeah. Well, I'll echo everything. I think preparation is knowing what the goal is can help you stay on track in the first place. I worked with one manager who struggled with difficult conversations, and we got her to the point where she was able to just write down the goal of the conversation. And just that one thing, just writing down the goal of I need to give you this specific feedback or I need to do this specific thing. She said it helped her so much, like beyond every other technique we ever talked about, is that was the one technique that helped her stay focused on this is what we are talking about. And we can talk about like in the moment what you're going to say, but just that preparation of knowing what you're going to do is so key to keeping things on track.
I love what you shared. And it sounds like that can help also part of the preparation. And it sounds like it could also help mentally and emotionally. If we even have that piece of paper and have the main points, not just maybe the goal, but for some people, it's even helpful to list all the goal, all the kind of bullet points they want to address. And even bring that piece of paper with them to that meeting and saying, sometimes I'm nervous. I don't want to forget. It's really important for me to share this. And so when somebody starts going off tangent, it could be even bringing that focus. I hear you, depending on the specific situation. Let's say I hear you. How about we park this for let's talk about it in the next meeting. For this meeting, I really would like to cover these points. Would that be
Mm,
okay? We can even schedule, or we leave it at the end of this meeting if we have extra time. If not, we'll schedule another time to talk about this topic deeper. So that could be one of the strategies,
yeah,
how we can stay focused and keep kind of the boundary or the container of that particular conversation.
yeah, yeah. You know what else I always tell people is even at the beginning of the conversation to keep people on track, the very first thing you should do is get them to agree what the conversation is about. Tell them what the conversation is about, have them agree we are talking about this today. We're talking about this feedback. And you know, it's one of those things where you're just getting their buy-in like okay, we agree this is the frame of what we're talking about. We're talking about this feedback if it's a work situation. And it's not going to 100% prevent them from going on a tangent, but later when they do go on a tangent, if they go on a tangent, it gives you something to say and pull back to and say, hey, listen, earlier we agreed we were going to talk about this, and I appreciate you bringing that up. But right now, let's focus on this.
I love how you're mentioning kind of having that agreement, the consensus, getting everybody on the same page. And that
Mm-hmm.
could be even not just before at the beginning, but I'm thinking of another. Let's say somebody brings up, or during that conversation and discussion, let's say you discover a new challenge that the people didn't see before. And now there's a choice. Do we continue working on the agenda that we originally had, but here is this other problem? Sometimes it can happen that we decide, what, it actually doesn't make sense to even progress on these points unless we really resolve this bigger challenge. So it could happen that in the middle of the conversation, if that makes sense, and it still is helping the ultimate purpose of the conversation, helping the project, helping resolve the problem, let's say, then it might be helpful to, okay, so now we are at a point we need to decide, do we continue in our agenda or do we actually focus on this one and
Mm.
get that agreement sometimes even in the middle of the meeting? What's
Yeah.
coming up for you as you
How do
hear
you
this?
decide that criteria? How do you like what's your when you're talking to people, how do you decide whether you want to continue exploring this tangent or whether you say no, we need to stay focused on this original agenda topic?
That's a great question. An example. So I do that a lot in coaching sessions with leaders and, let's say, leading workshops or leading conversations. It could be a comparable, what's coming up for me, a situation. Let's say I had a training. I had an agenda. We had to, everybody was supposed to um, do their work, working on their task. Now, what I've noticed, because there was something happening politically dramatic at the same time, and everybody was a little bit distracted, let's say, and some people were emotionally charged and afraid. For me, I had a decision to make because I've noticed that they're not in the headspace to
Mm,
be able to focus on the agenda. So I made a decision, and got their buy-in and seeing, you guys, it seems there's some distraction. Would that be helpful to pause here for a moment, get that cleared out first, and then refocus once we address, let's say, put 15 minutes talking about what's happening right now,
mm,
then get it out of the way, and then we can focus.
yeah.
So that was a little bit of a detour, yet creating that space to clear that space so people can actually go back and focus rather than being just half brain thinking about something
Mm,
else. So in that situation, that could be helpful if, let's say, something happened in the company. Let's say there was a layoffs and the leader pretends everything is as usual and tries to stick with the agenda when people are emotionally triggered. That might not work to actually
mm,
stay focused. So I think I'm myself getting on the tangent of how actually what are the exceptions when we can steer off a little bit,
mm,
but in a way, not steer off completely, but actually make it more efficient. So if we notice that people are triggered, something happened right before the meeting, clear it out first, take 5 minutes, let's say, to really discuss that, close it out so that people can start and really be present during the meeting and the following discussion, if that makes
mm.
sense. What's coming up for you?
Yeah, I like that. I think that's absolutely what we talk about a lot in this in the work we do, right? Is in this podcast is how do you create a dialogue? How do you create that open conversation as opposed to you going in to shut things down? And there's some like, I say, bring it back to the what you agreed on at the beginning. And there's a softer way I also tell people is you could always say, listen, I know earlier we agreed to talk about this feedback, and now you're talking about this. I get there's a possibility I may be missing something. Can you help me understand the link between these two? And that's a softer way of doing it. And
Yeah,
I've done that before, and it's helpful for me to it does two things. One is if there isn't a link, it's kind of like a gentle nudge to them without actively calling them out that like,
well
hey, we're
then,
not talking about this.
yeah,
But also, what's more frequent is they somehow describe how it relates to what we're talking about. And I say, okay, that makes sense. You're helping flesh things out. Let's bring it in and make sure we're still talking about this main topic though. So usually when they bring that up, it helps me at least get more context. But there have been times where I bring it up and they realize, oh, actually, we could talk about that later.
makes sense. And I also like about the approach that you're not dismissing it. Don't
Mm-hmm.
talk about it as now. Let's focus here. But you're actually looking at actively listening, being present with them. So and inquiring, is there a connection? What is the connection? Help me understand. And
Yeah,
so they can feel heard and have peace within themselves. Okay, Chris is listening. Okay, actually this is, sorry, I'm getting off tangent here. Let's refocus back.
yeah. For you, Lucy, what's the now? I also want to bring up what would be the most direct way you would interrupt somebody that you would recommend people interrupt somebody that's on this kind of tangent and this train of thought that doesn't seem to stop, and they're not really giving you a ton of space to jump in and ask any of these questions. How would you kind of jump in?
Great question. Um, so there are two situations if that's somebody that I already know, they have the tendency to do that, then I make that agreement at the beginning before
Mm.
we start, kind of in private. Really, do I have your, let's say, in session, or if do I have your permission? I really want to stay on the point here. We have limited time. Would that be okay? Anytime we get off a topic, I kind of bring us back. And
Mm.
so then in the meeting, it's not coming as a surprise.
Yep.
I even had an agreement with somebody. I just lift the hand and they kind of pause in
Mm.
the past. So it could be gestures. Let's say if you are in person, sometimes we just lift, or some people, they even hear I take a breath and they already know to pause. I breathe very loudly, or they're very in tune to
Yeah.
my facial expressions. So even that, or just raising a hand or saying, "I'm so sorry to interrupt you."
Mm.
Um, and can we just bring this back, and according to the agreement that we made at the beginning, kind of
Mm.
let's stay focused. Let me write this down, or let's put this down as the next point to discuss it later. So I still make sure to address that, but let's really get back as we agreed at the beginning.
I
Any other
love that. I think setting
strategy?
those ground rules, I think setting those ground rules is helpful. And it's just helpful to set that stage of like, we're all going to be playing by the same rules in
Yes.
some capacity.
I found it very helpful and haven't had anybody respond negatively once we set the ground
Mm.
rules and once
Yep.
they have the buy-in. Of course, there could be situations when there's a new person, right? This makes it a little bit more complicated.
Mm.
In the meetings, let's say, and we are just participants, not the leader or the facilitator of the meeting.
Yeah.
And let's
What
say
if it's
I
a
had
one-on-one setting? I think these are good examples for a group setting. What if it's a one-on-one?
yes.
How would you kind of interrupt somebody's flow?
So I've had those conversation even one-on-one. If that was somebody that I've noticed, we are getting off tangents in our meetings, then we had the conversation about let's stay on track.
Mm.
And then
Yep.
I had the gestures also in one-on-ones. Um, if it's somebody I don't know, then let's say depends on the intention why we are meeting. I've I feel I always am already trained myself to set the container at the beginning. So we are meeting what we want to talk about, how much time we have. Um, so it's very hard for me if I haven't done that.
Mm.
What would it look like if somebody talks a lot or starts detouring? I would say, and at any point when I either, again, if they are really unstoppable, then I usually really lift a hand, or if they don't respond to that, I'm so sorry to interrupt. Um, I just wanted to bring us back. I really would love to hear this. And considering that we have only limited time today, would that be okay if we refocus here and then we can set some time? And let's connect after we take care of the agenda that we really have to take care of. I would love to hear the rest of the story.
Mm.
Or let's connect another time to really finish talking about this.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are some of your strategies that
Yeah.
you're using?
Well, I agree in group setting. I think that's absolutely the what I would suggest as well. What I've done is just set ground rules. I've been fortunate. I haven't had to do that ahead of time with anybody in the session that's talked a lot. Now, I would, if it did become a problem, I would do the exact same approach. I would talk to them ahead of time, like, "Hey, listen, I appreciate all your input. Here's the reality: is that it's also making our meetings longer, or where it's making it us difficult to get to the other things. I want to hear your input. Is there a way we can still hear your input and still make sure we get to the rest of the stuff in the meeting, or make space for other people if that's the issue? Like, depending on
Yeah,
the issue.
makes sense. Yeah.
Fortunately, like my first course of action always though is let's do it as a group.
Hmm.
Let's agree. What are the ground rules of we have to use as a group to make sure we figure
Yes.
out how do we all work together? Um, the goal isn't to call anybody specifically out, but but I'm trying to role model for them. Like, let's all work together. We're all trying to fix a problem, not just one person is a problem.
Yes. Yeah.
And I would say usually that works. I don't know if I've ever had a time where it hasn't worked to stem behavior like that.
Mm-hmm.
If it's one on one, if somebody's really going on a tangent and they just keep going and they're not giving me space to jump in, I'll just interrupt and I'll say, "Hey, Lucy, thank you for your input, and I appreciate what you're saying. I just would like to also make sure we talk about this other thing." And so I think it's important. I look them in the eye, I say their name. I say, "Hey, Lucy."
Nice. That's a good one. Yes.
I think that's a very jarring thing for people when they just hear their name directly in a one-on-one situation.
Yeah.
It just gets your attention right away. So
I
it's
agree.
really about getting attention and not like, yeah, if they give you a breath, then yes, you can jump in when they stop. But if they're not,
True.
you have to interrupt.
Catch the
And
attention.
it's tough for people if they're not, if they are concerned, if they're very conflict avoidant, they don't want to, step in. It's very difficult to get used to that. So it's just practice, just getting used to that practice of saying, "Hey, Lucy," you
And
know,
it can be uncomfortable at the beginning. That's for
right,
sure.
right,
Yeah.
right. When we can't do this to other adults, or other kids, but sometimes when my kids are talking too much, I'll just like grab them by the shoulder and say, "Okay, okay, okay, let's stop and chill out."
Yeah, probably
But
not to other adults. No.
can't do that to other adults, unfortunately. So, is there anything that you would say don't do? Is there anything that you're like, definitely don't do this?
Well, I would say the first one, a very clear one. Of course, we don't want to get angry and name call them, or I think that would be the biggest no-nos.
Mm,
Or
yeah,
you always do this. I cannot believe you don't
always.
never let me speak when I want to share. Or you always start talking about something else when I want to. So already that brings that angry energy. And I understand if that happens repeatedly, um, that it might be difficult to self-regulate. And at the same
Hmm.
time, that's why it's important to really prepare for that conversation. And even if that happens repeatedly, have a conversation actually about that and set the ground
Mm,
rules.
yeah, yeah, I like
Um,
that. Always or never, staying away from those. Um, and the only thing I'll add is when talking about interruptions, like I said to interrupt, right? Say, "Hey, Lucy."
yeah,
I always also say, take stock of what you're feeling before you interrupt. Because if you're interrupting out of anger and frustration, then that's a different story. You need to think about why you're feeling angry and frustrated first before you interrupt. When you interrupt, it should be coming from a place of being calm, being in control, and you're responding and you're trying to get control of a dialogue, of a flow in some way. But if you are frustrated, if you're angry, if you're anxious about something, you can still interrupt. And I would say instead of continuing the conversation, suggest that you take a break. Say, "Hey, listen, is it okay if we take a break? Lucy, I just need to take a 5 minute break. Is that okay?"
mm. I love the strategy. Which so what I'm hearing the don't not just the never ever always uh, but also really checking in with what is our energy there. And if we
Hmm.
are angry and we cannot say that without really an intense or those never ever always, then it's better to take a break.
Yeah,
So that's
I think
additional
so.
what to do instead rather than being angry and communicating out of anger
Yeah,
or
that's what I think at
impatience.
least. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great strategy. I've always, I've also, did get stuck in my head, the always never. I also had the times when we took a break, when in some business settings, when I was working with my previous business partner, and we had some emotionally triggering conversations. Um, and we notice, you know what, I'm getting triggered. Let's take a break for 5-10 minutes, and let's come back and talk about this from a different little space.
Yeah.
Let's let's do
Yeah.
a little reset. And that was actually very helpful.
Yeah. Love that. So, any other tips you want to share?
Any other tips? We touched on it, maybe not specifically on the active listening. Um,
Hmm.
to come there, not only don't what not to do, don't be angry, what to do instead, being engaged in that conversation. And
Hmm.
so we do want to share our message, but also really hearing what is coming up for the other one. Why are they interrupting, or bringing up the other thing? So
Yeah.
also being mindful and acknowledging that. Sometimes we also want to push it away. Let me just talk. I want to talk about this, which is a little bit of frustrated energy, but also looking at how can we validate the other person's perspective if that's completely different perspective or a
Hmm.
different tangent.
Yeah.
And I think you did a great job of actually appreciating at the beginning. Thank you for what you're sharing here, and let's refocus here,
Yep.
and bring it the name. So maybe being actively still listening, even not just sharing, focus on what we want to say, but also listening, um, for the information and also for their intention, possibly. I don't
Hmm.
know if that's too complicated. What does it make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think we always hammer it, especially when we talk about resistance or pushback, is trying to understand, right? That them going on tangents is serving a purpose of some sort for them,
Yes.
right? So it's helpful to understand, or at least try to assess what may be happening, and then you can test it out and you can ask about it, and maybe you're wrong, but at least you'll get more information as you keep testing and asking and being curious, right?
Because sometimes when we get the pushback, or somebody goes off tangents, we tend to close off. We don't want to be still curious.
Right, right.
So seeing if you can get into that curiosity state and stay there a little bit longer.
Yep. Love
So
it.
it's
So,
part of self-regulation and noticing what the other person is seeing,
yeah.
feeling, think.
So I'm wondering, I think it's worth us demonstrating what that could
Yeah,
look like. Um, and I guess it doesn't have to be super involved because it's very straightforward how we'll respond. But I think it would be helpful if we just did a professional situation and a personal situation. That way you can see it still works even if you're talking to a friend or a family member about that stuff.
sounds good.
Right. Hey, Chris here. I really appreciate you listening to this podcast. And if you are listening to this podcast because you're looking to get better at these difficult conversations, well, if you really want to de escalate difficult behaviors and you want to be assertive without being aggressive and being true to yourself, I have a self paced course that can really help you because I know it's difficult being assertive in lots of different situations. If you're at work and you have to give feedback, if you have to deliver bad news to an employee, or deliver bad news to somebody that you care about in your personal life, or you're struggling to deal with defensive or sensitive people who are pushing your buttons and you don't know how to push back. It doesn't have to be that way. There is a world where you can handle these tough emotions with confidence. You can speak honestly and kindly while you're still being assertive. And you have the ability to manage emotional outbursts and stubbornness calmly, because these are things that I've had to overcome and learn. And so this self-paced course goes through all of those things. I've created this trust framework that helps you think through how to prepare for and how to facilitate hard conversations. And you hear a lot of it actually in this podcast as I talk about how to handle difficult conversations in lots of different scenarios. Currently, the course is closed for enrollment. There's a waiting list. If you are interested in learning more, enrollment will open up at the end of August and the beginning of September. So please go to the website. I'll link it down below, and you can learn more about it and join the waiting list if you want to hear more about it. But I'd love to see you there. So let's do a work situation first, if that's okay.
Okay.
And I'll be the manager.
Yeah.
So in this situation, I'll be the manager. Lucy, you are my employee. And
Alrighty.
in this situation, I'm talking to you. I'm trying to give you some critical feedback because you've been coming in late multiple times over the past couple of weeks. And I need to give you this warning or give you this feedback before it becomes
Mhm.
even worse.
Yes.
And you'll try your best to navigate away from it.
Take us somewhere else.
Yeah, take us somewhere else. All right, let's jump into it. Hey, Lucy, how are you this morning?
I'm good, Chris. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. Listen, I know it's may seem a little out of the blue. I need to give you some feedback if that's okay.
Sure, I don't have much time because I'm running a little bit late. But
Perfectly
could
fine.
could we do it a little bit later because I have so much on my plate. Oh my God, there's like from admin, they're chasing me with so much emails.
Yeah, I get
So
it. So
I've been,
it listen,
back from
I'm happy
vacation
to
and I'm so
Lucy, I'm
overwhelmed.
yeah, I get it. I'm happy to at least tell you what it's about so that you can be prepared for later if that's okay.
Yeah, okay. Or do you want to send me email?
I'll let me just tell you that way.
Okay,
I don't want it to
sure,
be
sure, Chris.
misinterpreted
Okay,
if
yes,
that's
of course,
okay.
Chris. Yes, yes.
So
Okay, sounds
so
good.
Lucy, I just wanted to tell you that I've noticed over the past few weeks you've been coming in late 5 times over the past couple of weeks. And I didn't say anything at first because I understand there's things that come up. So it's just becoming more of a pattern
Yep.
and it's impacting the rest of the team. So I just want to talk about that with you later, if
Mm.
that's cool.
Yeah, I guess we can talk about it later. You know that I've been busy. I'm back from vacation and I have so many things going on also with my family, so I hardly get any sleep and sometimes it's
Yeah.
mornings get crazy and traffic in LA is just horrible.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen,
It's
traffic
just
everywhere is terrible. I don't know anywhere that traffic is fun. So I looked at your calendar earlier. I know that you have 3 o'clock today easy or sorry, there's nothing at 3 o'clock later today. I'm gonna put something in your calendar. Let's meet then if that's cool.
I already wanted to take care of the emails, but if you think that I should put the work on hold and just we can have the conversation, you make the call if you want me to reprioritize and have that rather than me doing the work.
That's a good question. You
Um,
know what? Let's do that. I'd rather talk about to you about it today, and then that's okay because then we'll just move our 1-to-1 that was scheduled for later in the week, and we'll just do it later today. So you'll
okay,
still get back that time later.
I see, I see. Okay, so we don't have to do the one-on-one later. That
Yeah,
that would be helpful if I don't have to have that meeting because I have really
yeah,
so much on my plate.
understandable. Let's make it happen. All right, thanks,
Thanks, Chris.
Lucy.
Thanks, Chris. So I
You
was,
started to go right into the tangents. Thank you.
I tried.
Yeah, you tried.
But you also were trying to pull me back and you got me to commit to not escape from that meeting.
Yeah,
Even though I tried to overwhelm you with so much of my overwhelm. Um,
yeah. So tell me about what are the techniques that I pulled through that seemed effective from your perspective.
you were firm. You didn't let yourself to be swept in my overwhelm, and you stayed firm, grounded, and you said my name. Um, and actually, you pick something specific, specific action. So first, kind of I just wanna you took it step by step. So first, it was I just want to give you feedback, and I try to move away from that. So then you just told me, kind of you took it step back, just minimum. I'll just tell you what is that about. Um, so for me, okay, that was harder to wiggle out of that one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so you went for it. You shared that. And then I tried to escape from that. And then you brought it back again. You basically stayed focused and kept bringing me back. um didn't respond. Yes, you affirmed, yes, the traffic, this is also back, but you didn't let that distract you from the focus. and you actually suggested one specific time meeting with me. So you, from my perspective, you kept being stable, stayed focused on one specific outcome of that small conversation rather than letting me escape completely.
Mhm.
How was it for you from your perspective?
Yeah, I was not expecting to have to say your name right away. But you kept going, and I was like, I gotta reel this back in. I gotta get you back into this conversation. Um, I think this is what we talked about earlier: is having a goal for the conversation makes it so much easier to stay focused on what the conversation needs, what needs to happen in the conversation. So I need to give you feedback, and it's not like mission critical. Like I need to give you feedback in the next 5 minutes, or something bad will happen. Right? This
Yeah.
is something that can wait, like maybe a couple of hours.
Yeah.
So in my mind, I've already decided, I okay, we don't need to give the feedback right this minute, but I do need to give it to you today or tomorrow. And so all I need to make sure is I want to make sure you at least know what it's about, because I don't, number one, I don't want you to be like anxious all day and like, you know, worried about what's going to happen. So I want to just tell you what's happening right away. And, when it comes to hearing all those things, I don't know if other people will agree with me, but my philosophy is I just don't care. I don't care. And not in a way that like I don't believe you and I think it's nonsense. It's more as in it doesn't affect my life. I don't care whether it's a valid excuse or not. If I just have to accept this is your reality, good enough. I just need you to get back into this conversation. All the other stuff is fine. That's your life. Traffic, yes, I agree. Traffic stuff. And we still need to talk about this thing.
Yes.
So in a way, like I kind of don't care about all those other things.
I think that that creates, I would say, you created that boundary. Yes, something is happening, and I still need to get this done. Let's refocus. And when I reflected, I think for me, naturally, that might be more difficult. Also, because I'm being a coach. So, the
Mm-hmm.
empathy for the other, I want to hear them out. So, for me, it might be really more difficult to keep that. So, for me, I would have to really prepare myself. Yes, they'll
Mm-hmm.
probably give me all the things and also bring them back. Validate,
Yeah.
yes, I hear this is difficult time right now. And let's have a conversation at least for 10 minutes today at this time. How about that? Just like you
Yeah.
did, kind of really acknowledge that. And and that was beautiful that you created that separation, that you didn't get sucked in my drama in a way
Mm.
that I was
Yeah.
creating the
Right. Because that's, you could get into that and then you're like stuck
oh
in
yeah.
trying to problem solve these random things that aren't really your problem to solve.
Exactly. Yes. That could be the slippery slope for somebody who is empathetic leader. And I have, clients telling me, Lucy, the employee, when I try to give them feedback, they start crying.
Mm.
And so being able to stay calm, even in the face of the employee crying, and how to navigate that could be a tricky situation. So again, it comes back to our own emotional regulation, being prepared. And if they start to cry,
Yeah.
um, hear them out. Seems like this is emotional for you. I'll let you, you know, kind of being staying there till usually people calm down. If we don't try to fix it right away, and then when they're able to speak again, okay, let's get back to that topic.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important. I didn't make a big deal out of this in the middle of the conversation, obviously, but it's important to note the role of being flexible as I'm doing all of this, right? Like I wanted to give you the feedback now, you can't because you're doing this stuff, right? Again, I don't care, but I still do need to get this done. So like, I'm willing to flex it. Like I don't care why it needs to flex. I'll just flex it. And later on, you're worried about this, getting your other work done. Okay, I'll be flexible and move some other stuff around to make sure this is still you're still getting your work done, because I still need you to get your work done at the end of the day.
I think that it was a great move. So you created, that boundary. Yes, it needs to get done, but it was also there was a door. It wasn't like a wall. No, I don't care at all what's going on for you. This is what needs to happen. And that would be another extreme, right? No,
Right.
actually, you stayed firm and assertive in what you needed, but also were flexible, as you mentioned. So I felt on the receiving end was there was less resistance because yes, I tried to wiggle out of it because I have a lot to work on, but you acknowledged that and gave me, okay, more time. We don't have to have the other meeting.
Yeah.
So that increased my buy-in. Okay, if we have the meeting now, then I have more time later to do what I need to do.
Yeah. And if we had a lot of time, I could have explored like, well, what's the importance of having those emails done later that you can't meet about this, and really trying to explore, see if there's other
Yeah.
underlying resistance. But if you're in a rush, and I'll accept that, I'll just accept you're in a rush, you have to do things, that's fine. So let's just make these quick concessions to see if that's what's going on. It's a way for me to test, like, is that really, I could see like in the middle of the role play, you're trying to like, what other excuse can I throw up there? Right. And that'll happen. Sometimes people will have like other reasons why they can't. Like, oh no,
Damn.
but I really need to do this. So there is a little bit of a dance, and if you don't have time to go into a long discussion and explore and be curious, it's okay to throw out these things but it's really more to be a test. It's not meant to be I'm going to solve the problem here. Ultimately, it's more like I just want to test if that's actually the reason you're pushing back.
Yes, makes sense. And I really like that you didn't try to do the whole thing, the whole conversation right there, but really just got one step further and ended with a specific action. With some people that are, let's say, as you started our conversation today with a client that has more avoiding tendencies.
Mm-hmm.
So for the manager that doesn't want to create the conflict, it's already difficult for them to start the conversation. And then
Yep.
when they get a pushback from that, then they're like, you know what? Okay, let's talk about it later. So
Yep.
really staying focused, just like you did. Well done.
Yeah. So let's jump into our second role play of a personal situation. Let's just
Yeah.
say we're a family. Let's say we're brother and sister, and I'm just going to use a real scenario for my life. Let's say our mom is moving, and we have to help her move a bunch of stuff, and we have to do like all these utilities. All the things you have to do when you move, to move
Yes.
utilities, all the moving stuff. And let's say that you have been taking the lead on a lot of this stuff, but you needed me to do a bunch of the like utilities, call utility companies, and all these other logistics things. And so, but I haven't done them yet. So now you need me to like do this because our mom's going to be moving next week.
So by next week, we need to get it done.
Yeah, but I haven't yet,
Hmm.
even though I said I would. So, and now
Wow.
you're trying to like say, you're just trying to talk to me about like, let's make this happen.
Okay. Hey, Chris, how are you doing?
Good, good. What's up?
I have a quick question, and actually, I want to check in with you. You know how we talked, our mom is moving, and I was supposed to take care of the other thing and the boxes and the
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
movers, and so that's happening. And I'm also very busy with kids and all the other
yeah,
things
yeah, yeah,
happening.
yeah.
So I wanted to check in what's the status on getting the utility bills transferred. Where is it at?
Ugh. Oh man, Lucy, you would have no idea how difficult it is. I tried doing that last week when we last talked. I tried doing
Yeah.
that, but then I got a call from my buddy Carm, and he was in trouble, and so like I had to go down and help him out with something real fast, and that
Ah,
took like
Chris.
all night. And then we were just like I had to pick him up from the police station,
Wow,
so I
that
had to
sounds
go
like a
pick him up, and it was just wild.
crazy.
I know,
Chris,
I
Chris,
know.
I know you're such a caring person, and I really appreciate that about you. You really want to care for everybody else. And I really want us pay attention here too because our mom, that's we have a timeline. What would need to happen so
I
that we get it
listen,
done
I
by
know,
I think in
Lucy,
2 days.
Lucy, I know we have a timeline. You don't got to tell me about that timeline. I know this. But man, that really threw off my entire week.
I
Having to
get
go to
it.
the
I
police
get it.
station, having to bail them out.
Sounds like an adventure
Ugh,
right there.
ugh.
What by when could you do it? Do you, here, what about do you have any
Can you do
questions
it?
about it? No, unfortunately not. So I need to also run in 5 minutes. So what would be it needs to be
I
done
mean,
by the end of the week. So by Friday at 3 p.m. the latest. Ideally tomorrow.
I'll, I mean, I guess I'll call them after this. That's
Okay,
fine.
perfect. Awesome. Awesome. So how about we have a quick call, quick check-in on Friday morning, just to make sure that we have everything covered and we have still a little room in case we need to take care of anything else. Sounds good?
Okay, boss. Okay.
Okay. Chris, you're the best. Thanks so much.
See ya. I'll
See
take
you.
care of it.
Thank you. So,
Thanks for keeping me on track, Lucy.
thank you for committing to getting it done. You're such a caring son.
Yes, yes. I'm just a caring person.
You are. But I see that how you wanted to get kind of shift the focus on other things.
Yeah. You know what? Number one, I saw that you said my name right away to get me. And then I tried using it on you.
Yes,
But what I really loved was you said, I got 5 minutes. Can we get this? Like, what are we going to do about this? Right. I think
kind of the
it's similar
boundary.
to when we role played that manager. I think in this kind of situation, when somebody's on a tangent, there's a degree of, yes, you can still care about the other person and be empathic about like their life situation and
Yeah.
all the context. There's also a degree of, I don't care, right? Like all those things are in the past. We need to do this other thing right now.
Yes.
This is the task, is we need to call, or we need to go to this meeting, or we need to be at work. And so that's the real issue, is not this other stuff that we're trying to figure out. It's what is happening right here.
True, true. Like refocus us for the future. This is we have just 5 minutes. Let's refocus what
Yeah,
matters the most and what can we do rather than what is in the past.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So I think you did a
Okay.
great job. You tried to. So I think it's interesting. You did the acknowledgement and the empathy and the reflective response.
I cannot
Very
help
nice of you.
myself.
Um, I'd be interested. It'd be interesting to hear from people watching or listening. What is their relationship with their sibling? Would they be so empathic, or would they say, "Listen, dude, you got to just do this"?
With my sisters, that's I think it's so ingrained in me that strategy that it's
Mm,
but real life experience. I don't know if I'm getting here on tangent, but it's still within the topic.
yeah.
There was a friend that was kind of more of an acquaintance, part of the community that I'm part of, and he has been talking people's ear off. Usually, that's when he calls. Usually, it's for an hour, and most of them talking. He just has the need to speak. And so, when I had time, I was there to support as a friend in the past. Now, we were together at one place when I really needed to focus. I couldn't speak, and I gave him some heads up. I really this day today, when you see me, I really need to be focused, talk to other people, or just have some time to myself to recharge. And so I try to share these are my needs, these are my boundaries.
Mm,
And he wouldn't actually, it was so hard for him to respect that when I said, remember how I talked about this, I need some space, I cannot talk to you right now. He kept, let me just say one more thing.
mm-hmm,
So at
mm-hmm,
one point, I actually had to get up and leave.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And that made him upset um, because he really was in that mode. So for me, that was my limit. If you cannot respect my boundaries when I need that, that also means we cannot be, really close friends. So for,
Hmm.
for some listeners, if they have somebody in their life, it could be a relative, it could be maybe a friend from the past that continuously maybe was disrespecting the boundary. Maybe sometimes it is really also the time to separate and say no to those meetings with those
Mm.
people if they really continuously disrespect the boundary that you
Yeah.
set. So
Yeah.
that could be like an extreme maybe example, but hopefully helpful to some of the listeners that are dealing with people like that don't hear the boundary, don't respect the boundary.
Yeah. I think that's a great example because there's lots of times when people listen to us or talk to us and I think my experience is they often get surprised when I say, if eventually one of the interventions at a workplace is, well, you're just gonna have to go to HR. You're just gonna have to
Yeah.
do a warning. You're gonna have to put them on a
Yes.
performance improvement plan.
Yep.
And they get confused. They're like, isn't there like some kind of like verbal technique that can help get like, if you tried everything, then that's it. Like there's some limit to
Exactly.
all this stuff.
Yep.
Like your boundaries in personal relations, like there's a boundary. Like you're gonna
There
have to
is.
either end it at some point if need be, or we can try our best. All of these techniques are about how do we control ourselves and manage the best way possible. But sometimes you just have to get up. Sometimes you just have to, file a warning, start the
Exactly.
progressive discipline process.
Yep.
It's That's just part of it.
So hopefully it doesn't get to those situations, but also be prepared in case you continuously do your best and you give them feedback and set the boundary and it keeps being disrespected, then there's the next step to really protect yourself in the personal situations and also in the work situations at the same time to really get
Right.
HR involved.
Yep. Exactly. So,
Darn it,
Lucy,
we finish on this note.
I know. Well, why don't we, Lucy? Why don't we do your takeaways? What are your big takeaways from today?
Big takeaways. The power of calling somebody's name and sharing that, how that can bring the attention. So that's one of my takeaways, really how important that is. And to remember somebody's name also if you meet somebody at the networking event. It
Yeah. Yeah.
could be extra motivation. What would be your takeaway?
The taking saying somebody's name. I like the idea of being really prepared and centered and
Mm,
being and thinking ahead of time what you're going to do. As you mentioned earlier on, have a plan for what you're going to say or do when they do, if and or when they do go off a tangent. Do you need to meet with them ahead of time if it's a group session or a meeting? Or do you just need to, in the beginning, set ground rules around that? Whether it's a nonverbal cue to tell them to, hey, you're talking too much, right? Or just a verbal cue. And I think that's setting those boundaries and being willing to follow those boundaries. So when you set those boundaries, somebody crosses it over and over again, it's being willing to also take it to the next level of whatever that is,
yes.
whether it's walking away or involving HR or taking it to the next step, whatever it may be, right? But
Yeah.
being willing to maintain that boundary.
And I also liked, I would add to that, taking a pause when we notice that we are really getting emotionally triggered. Even when we prepared to the maximum, it's still powerful emotion and we are getting angry. Really taking the pause and say, could we just take a break for 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Come back, let me take a break. I really want to talk from a different space than I'm getting into. And just take a
Yeah.
break.
Yeah. Yeah.
So sounds
Well,
like
that's
we
it.
are gonna take a break now before our
Take a
next
break.
episode.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Lucy.
Thank you so much, Chris. I look forward to our next episode. Next time will be interview, so stay tuned.
Yeah. So, for everybody listening, please like, subscribe, comment, follow, email us, call us, do anything, but
Ask us
please let us
questions.
ask us questions. We'd love for you to stay
Say our
connected with
names.
us. So say our names, stay connected with us so that we know who you are and we can help make this podcast for you. But otherwise, we will see you all next week.
See you
Bye,
next
all.
week.
How do you talk to an employee who's refusing to get on board with a change? Your company is changing to a new software system. You're learning to use new technology. You're switching your systems over, but you got employees fighting back, pushing back. They're saying they refuse. How do you handle that? What can you do as a leader, as a manager? That's what we'll talk about today on the art and science of difficult conversations. Welcome to the art and science of difficult conversations. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lucy, and we love having difficult conversations.
That's right. And each week we'll either share a tip, hear how others have gotten better at difficult conversations, or demonstrate common difficult conversations and what to do and what not to do.
Let's get into it.
Welcome to the art and science of difficult conversations, where we believe if you can communicate better, you can live better. My name is Chris, as always, and I'm joined here by Lucy. Lucy, how are you today?
I'm good. Thank you so much. Hello, everybody.
We are at the end of summer, and it's a little warm here today in Boston, and humid. It's just hot and humid. What about you?
It's cooling off a little bit. It's still kind of the morning gloominess before the sun rises above the clouds. It's part of the marine layer, which is nice because it cools it off a little bit. And there was even snow in California in the mountains already. They said it hasn't happened for 20
Hmm.
years. Cool fact.
It's interesting because I never realized how big, like, California and Texas are so big. I never
Mhm.
realize, or I always forget how big they are, that you can have such different things going on in the state at different times.
Absolutely. It's one of the things I love about here, living here, because in one day I can go to the beach, I can go to the desert or to the mountains. And I love that variety.
Do you like the beach? Are you a beach person?
I like the variety.
You like variety more so than the beach?
Yes, yes. So I like the beach. I also love the mountains and just going for a hike sometimes. So I like the flexibility, I would say.
Hmm.
I wouldn't be able to spend like the whole time at the beach. I would be bored
Hmm.
because I'm afraid to swim in the ocean by myself. So that's
Ah, so
that.
there it is. That's the issue. That's the real issue.
So maybe if I could swim and wouldn't be afraid, but I have a healthy respect to the ocean, being born in inland basically. And we don't have
True.
ocean in Czech Republic. So
True.
yeah.
I never thought I would like the ocean, or I never thought of myself as a beach person. Like, I never didn't really care about the beach all too much. But now that I've lived near the beach for, I don't know, like 14, 15 years, I find it hard. I would find it hard to move somewhere more inland where there is no easy access to a beach.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, I'm the same way. It's difficult for me to move further away because it's also hot there, much way hotter.
True, true,
So I
true.
cannot go for my walks there because it's so hot.
Yeah, yeah, that's tough. But
It is.
well, funnily enough, today we're talking about a fun, happy topic that everybody loves. You, as a manager and leader, you're trying to get your employee on board with a technology change, and they are just pushing back. They're fighting back. They don't want to do it. Whether or not they had good performance before, it doesn't really matter. But they're pushing back now. They're refusing to use the new system. They don't want to learn the new system. They're your top performer, so you just can't eat. It's not as easy as, I'm just going to let go of this employee because they're your top performer. You kind of need them. They've been there a long time. They got all the institutional knowledge. They're a good role model to everybody else on the team, except for this one thing.
Except for that one thing.
Except for that one thing. So I guess, Lucy, what do you think when you're thinking about this? When you're thinking about an employee that's struggling to get on board with the change, and this could be part of lots of other things, but I think it's unique when it comes to technology because the pace
True.
of it moves so fast compared to other
Oh,
types of
yeah.
changes.
Hmm.
So what are your thoughts? What are your best practices in terms of how a manager or leader can help their talk to their employee about this stuff?
I would say there are two different situations. One in a smaller company where the leader, the manager actually can get their buy-in before launching that change. So they could co-create and
Hmm.
check in with them. This is and get really get their buy-in by explaining the benefits really having empathy, listening to their concerns, fears, and seeing if they can address it and how they could move forward. If they get a buy-in, the accepting of the change, it might be still difficult and there will be hiccups, but it will be way easier. But let's say it's a large
Mm.
corporation, somebody on the top made a decision and the manager just needs to announce it. This has been done and
Mm-hmm.
they didn't have a say in the process of that. So what would be the first steps? I would say again, listening, being open, not pushing the change forward, but being open and listening. What are the concerns? What is the challenge? Is that maybe a lack of training?
Mm.
Or the training is not easy to understand and therefore they are being challenged? Or is that more because they are afraid that the technology will replace their job? And
Mm.
so there
Yeah.
is a different resistance, right, with the AI. Now, a lot of people are worried that if they basically learn to use that soon, it's going to replace them and their job.
Yeah.
So that's a little different resistance. So now really understanding where the employee is coming from, what is the true challenge, and then seeing how to address those concerns.
Mm-hmm.
And also, again, trying to get a buy-in, communicate the benefits, not just for the company, but also for the employee. Would that help streamline the process and therefore save, let's say, their admin time, which most of us don't like as much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So they could
Yeah.
focus on the things that they actually like. And also clear communication about expectations, I would say. Maybe some timelines, what needs to happen, and keep the feedback loop open and set
Mm.
up maybe some check-ins, regular check-ins to see how they're doing. What's coming up for you? What would you say are some key things? Anything
I
that I
I
haven't
love all
mentioned?
those tips. I think I agree with all of them. I'm actually wondering as you're talking, I think it'd be helpful for us to talk through because I think there are lots of reasons why somebody might be resistant to technology or new technology change. And yes, one of them could just be they just don't like change in general. They're afraid of it. But I think there's always deeper reasons, as you hinted at.
Yep.
They might be afraid of it taking over their job, right?
Yep.
In AI or um and I think that's the important reality is that yes, for some jobs, technology will take it over. And I think it's
Mm-hmm.
important to acknowledge and there's no way a manager could ever know 10 years into the future, 15 years, what's going to happen.
True. Yep.
So it's just like I always advise managers not to promise a promotion or a raise in the future. Same thing. It's hard to promise like this will never change your job or this will never take over your job. Sometimes it will. Sometimes it might in some capacity. There's lots of jobs that don't exist anymore because of
True.
technology.
Yep.
Um, there could be they're afraid of learning, not afraid of like they don't like it, but more afraid of they may not feel like they're a good learner, or they may feel like
Great
it's too
one.
overwhelming if because of the way that other
Yeah.
things are taught. Like if you're especially if you're a big corporation, if there's lots of big changes that happen all the time, they may not feel confident. And if they've been a top performer for all this time, suddenly if they're placed in a position where they're not a top performer or they have to struggle a little bit, it's unsettling for some people, especially if
Absolutely.
that ego, and not in a bad way, just ego, like their
Yep.
sense of self is threatened
Mm-hmm.
in some way.
Uncertainty in a way because I know
Yeah.
this old way I'm expert in it versus in the new way I have no idea what I'm doing. I might make mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and they may not just understand why it needs to happen. Right. They might actually be okay with the technology if they understood the purpose of the new change, right? Or the technology or why it's happening. Especially because sometimes technology change might not even be more easy, it might be more difficult or complex.
So,
um there's in the past like 10 years, HR systems have become much more user employee managed, right? So instead of
mhm.
HR having to input all your data, change things, employees can
Yeah,
go in and do the things on their own. And that's a big shift if you're not used to that. And so you're like, why
absolutely.
why I have to do this? Why do I have to put in my timesheet? Why do I have to do
It's
all
their
this other
job.
stuff myself? Yeah, it's somebody
Yep.
else's job. Why am I doing it? And
Yep.
so part of that is I just don't understand why. There's no good reason to do this. There's no context to what's happening. But what else? Why is there anything else that comes to mind for you about why somebody might be um, resistant to this technology or new technology?
think you covered it pretty well. A lot of the different causes in a way for the resistance could be also a worry from an increased workload.
Hmm.
Not only they need to get their job done, but they also need to learn and get the new training and learn the tool, which might be slowing them down rather than doing the things the old way.
Yeah.
Um, and that could tie again into not understanding, not having the buy-in into that this new way is better.
Right.
Maybe it's better for the company, but not better for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that's really crucial, understanding where they are coming from, because if we don't understand as the manager, it's really difficult to support them in moving through that. And some managers have approached, well, you just need to do it. Or now we are in the section, maybe what not to do. What would you say before I start? What would you say are the things what not to do here in this
What
situation?
not to do? Well, I think just telling them just do it. I think it's our way or the highway.
Yep.
Even though technically that is true, right? At a job that is our way or the highway, it's also you don't want to. That doesn't work. That's not going to bring lots of people over. Some people it might, and if you know them really well and you know they respond to that, then do it that way. It doesn't matter. They're going to respond to that. If you have people that don't respond to that, don't do that. That's not going to work.
Think you're bringing up great point that reminds me of different personality styles. Some people, they just need, give me what do you want me to do by when, I'll figure it out myself.
That's right.
No
Mm-hmm.
problem. For some people, if they are not considered the emotional concern, how they feel about it, and really they need a little bit more details and they need to know why they're doing that so that they are motivated. With those
Mm-hmm.
people, if we don't consider their situation and their way of approaching change, then we have a complete disconnect. And that comes back to really being aware and knowing the person
Right.
rather than just pushing through. This is the change. This is that could work for some people, but not for everybody.
Exactly. Yeah. And another don't, I would say, as a manager or leader, if you don't understand why this is happening, don't tell your people to do anything
It's a
until you
good
figure out
one.
why.
That's
If you don't know
mm,
why, go back and ask your manager or the leaders and say, listen, I'm still confused about this piece or that piece. I don't understand why we have to do this. Get
I
clarity so
love
that
that.
you can buy into it.
That's a great one. And I've had managers that didn't, that were not themselves. It wasn't about technology, it was other changes in the company. And they were very deep motivated and they were supposed to motivate their team. So it's a very difficult situation. And I love
Mm-hmm.
how you brought it up. Also, really knowing that we understand as the manager why we're doing that. So we can actually get the buy-in from somebody else. And
Yeah.
even maybe dealing with the discomfort of admitting, well, I didn't really get it, like, and talking to their supervisor,
Right. And
which,
yeah, and because I think I've seen plenty of managers that um, get questions pushback from their staff, or maybe not even pushback, just real well-meaning questions like, "I just want to understand this." Like
yeah,
maybe the team's not opposed to it; they just don't know all the details. They want to know more about this, and the manager doesn't know this because they haven't asked enough questions themselves, and they try to make it up. And so, because they're just making it up from what they understand, then it just kind of branches off what's going on with the messaging. It becomes very unwieldy, and then different teams now understand different parts of it, or
and a
maybe they even
chaos.
understand a
Yep.
totally different thing altogether because the manager was making up stuff on the fly.
So
So
there's
you're right. It's okay to
miscommunication.
yeah, it's miscommunication. It's okay to say I don't know. I don't know that. That's a good. I had a
Yep.
boss that was like that. Was really good about that. If we would bring up our opposition to new things all the time, and she'd say that's a good question. Let me go back and ask that. I think that's perfectly
Mhm.
reasonable to have
Absolutely.
that listening, as you mentioned earlier. Listen to what their concerns are. If you don't know the answer, bring it back, figure it out. Just say I don't know. I need to go back and figure this out.
That brings me to the point that all of us in difficult conversations, it's 100% responsibility on both sides. So
Hmm.
also that's the responsibility for how the manager manages their emotions. And if they get triggered, let's say when the employee asks something they don't know, are they going to just admit, yes, you know what, I don't know. And knowing that admitting that manager doesn't know something doesn't mean they're a horrible manager or they're not worth
Mm-hmm.
anything. It just means it's a normal, especially nowadays, that we cannot know unless we get the implanted chip, maybe in the future, but not right now yet.
Yeah.
That is normal not to know, and it's normal to admit, and it doesn't have to be shameful. Because some managers, if they are not self-aware, let's say, or they don't manage the emotions, they may even push back. You know, why you're asking this question, you should already know that, or you didn't need to worry about that. Just do what I tell you to do. It could be
Mm-hmm.
for some managers kind of to push back on
Mm-hmm.
employees asking questions, which of course is very demotivating. And that's part of the what not to do,
Yeah.
ideally.
Yeah. And I think you're making me think of another thing also is not getting triggered by employees pushing back. I think there's lots of people, or there are some people that I know of that their personality style is they're always just going to push back when they hear about a change because change is hard in general for
Yep.
everybody. But
Mm-hmm.
some people's initial reaction is I'm opposed to this automatically. And then later on, their brain just keeps thinking about it, and then they just talk themselves into it later on. But that initial opposition is just their personality. They just don't want to
Yep.
change because that's just their initial reaction in life. And I know this because my mom's like this. If we try to tell her to do something a different way, she's immediately saying, no,
No.
we're not doing it that way. But then later she'll think about it. Either she talks with a friend or I don't know, I'm not there. But she comes back and she is more agreeable and we talk through like how to do it together. Um, and I've inherited that a little bit. Like I fight that a lot is that idea of like, but why are we doing it a different way? Why are we changing this? But then I also recognize that I force myself to think about it and realize, okay, maybe there's some merit. Let's think about this some more. Let's talk about some more details. But it is that if a manager is immediately triggered by pushback, they're for lots of right reasons, right? Like you could just be triggered by loud voices or anger, um, or you could be, you may have just grown up in a personality where you believe that the manager says something and everybody else just does it, and so any kind of questioning, any kind of pushback is seen as disrespectful. And it's important to
Um,
take aside some of those biases and just be willing to sit in those hard emotions and be willing to listen to them and acknowledge them, right? Even if they might not just, even if they're just emotional pushback, just acknowledging that, hey, yeah, this is tough, or yeah, this is a big change, or that, yeah, I get it. There's been a lot of changes recently. So this is just adding more work on for us for a little bit.
you made me think of two different things. One, the cultural differences.
Mm,
Nowadays, with some global organizations, there could be working together with a manager, let's say, in different country. I have clients in Europe that are working with, colleagues in India, let's say, and there's some
mm,
culture differences
mm-hmm,
and how to navigate those. Um, when they say, yes, I understand, but maybe they're saying that because they don't want to lose the face and how to
mm,
navigate these. So, yes, we will accept the change, yet nothing is happening.
mm-hmm,
So there also might be opportunity for noticing whenever we get triggered. What is it that's
mm,
triggering us? And then having those difficult conversations could be accountability conversation at that point, or really understanding. So what's happening? You were saying you
mm,
understand. And so a lot of clients have actually also this challenge around the culture and navigated those. And the other point that you're making about really the emotional regulation and noticing our own triggers, when they can be coming from, and noticing different personality styles, that all of us are different, that the other, and appreciating both our and respecting our process, and that somebody else might have completely different process doesn't mean one is better or another one. And especially for leaders, if they are very driven, focus on the task, getting things done, sometimes what can happen, they forget about the emotions. And there are people that are more focused, yes, getting things done, but also the relationships matter,
mm,
and the emotions. Let's get it done in a way that feels good for everybody. And if the manager is the type that's really focused just on the tasks and misses the emotional part of the change, that might not work really well. And people
Mm,
will push back. They'll feel disempowered. They could even quit in some extreme cases.
mm,
So really noticing and being aware of also not just our emotions, but also the other people's
yeah, yeah.
perspectives
I
and emotions.
I'd love to get your thoughts on this. I work with a lot of managers that are also the opposite of that. They care too much about the emotions, and they often then let the expectations slide, or um they care so much about making sure the other person's comfortable and cared for and being empathic that they often forget that they also need to hold people to a standard. How would you advise people balance that?
That's a great question. Yes. So that comes back to that self-awareness. What is my strength? And when my strength is sometimes turned too far, when it's at the extreme, that could be something that sabotages not only the working relationship, but as well the performance. And knowing what is the boundary that I need to also set for myself and have the difficult conversation. So maybe those managers, they might be afraid or not willing to have the difficult conversation and give them the feedback that they are not meeting the expectations. And noticing that, and rather
Mm-hmm.
than avoiding the conversation, really diving into that and noticing, yes, I don't want to hurt somebody else's feelings, but this is part of the job, and bringing it back to this is, I know validating this is difficult for both of us. This is just a difficult process the company is going through right now. And at the same time, we need to get this done and really focusing what are the next steps so that we hit our goal, our timeline. And being
Mm-hmm.
mindful of not slipping into, okay, I don't want to hurt their feelings. So I cannot
Mm-hmm.
give them the feedback really the way I want to,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but really being self managing in preparing for the difficult conversation that we always talk about, and
Yeah.
really bringing what is the and focus more on the tasks, on getting this done, and what are the steps we need to move it forward. What would you say? Anything else that you would add there?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's being more thoughtful about the process, and also, there's a great chart in restorative justice and restorative practices. There's a great chart that shows it's a 2x2 grid about, like, and one axis is accountability or support, I should say, and one axis is the expectation or standard. And the ideal is you're supposed to have hold people to high expectations and give them the right support to get to that. So it's not that you're holding them accountable without the you're not you're holding them to a standard without giving them the support they need to get there, or vice versa, right? Both are not helpful.
I love that
It's about
perspective.
what is the standard. The standard is you're going to do, we have to do this, and let's talk about what you need. Kind of what you were talking about earlier is understanding the person, understanding what do they need, why are they pushing back, and they may not even know right away. If they haven't done a lot of self-discovery or
Sure.
discussion, they may not know why they're pushing back. They feel that internal urge to push back and say, no, I don't like this.
Mhm.
So as a manager, you're not the therapist. It's helpful though to talk through with your person and kind of dig deep, like what's driving this, and what that could tell you what they need. Do they need time to work on this on themselves? Do they need support, so like a peer group to talk through this, kind of all the changes and the new system and how to use it together? Do they need more training? Do they just feel like they need more training, or they need to see you go through the training with them because they're not sure how it's going to look, and so that uncertainty, and you can walk with them through that. But it's different for everybody, and you won't know
Mm,
unless you ask questions. So when you get that pushback, it's asking those questions, and then also being flexible on, or understanding where your flexibility is. Like, do they have to switch over to this new system by October 1st? And that's the end date. But you want them to start working on it now so that they get more comfortable with it.
yeah.
What are you flexible on? Like, how much can they do? Do you need to, create a more gradual plan for them to get into it? That might all be true. It's thinking through what does it look like to get them to that standard? But at the end of the day, also it's that standard. So
Mhm.
supporting them, giving that emotional support, acknowledging them, being empathic, and letting them know this is why, this is how, and this is how I'm going to support you to get to this point.
I love that. So both accountability standards and the support. You also mentioned, as you were talking, something else came to mind. Also noticing where they're at and maybe even validating rather than pushing back,
Mm-hmm.
or kind of dismissing their concerns, but really listening. What would you say would be some questions that a manager could ask an employee to help them figure out the manager, like what is their concern? What's the root cause of their
Yeah.
resistance?
I would just ask that. What's your concern about this new technology system?
I love it. Very powerful question.
I think it's just that. I think it's
Yes.
I think it's just I think a lot of managers that are more feel internal pressure, they're going to ask why. Just ask what
That's
instead.
good.
Just like what's your
True.
concern about this new system? And
That
part of it is you have to control your tone, right? It's got to be a tone of
hmm
genuine curiosity. You have no ulterior motive of what you're asking. You really just are trying to figure out what is this? I don't know what's back here. Maybe you know, maybe you don't, but let's figure this out. Like what's the block here so I can support you. Um, and so maybe it is also talking through I know it's a new thing, maybe acknowledging the context and just asking, what's the concern for you here?
I love that distinction that you're bringing, the what versus why question, because the why question could really sound almost judgmental,
Mm-hmm.
and then the
Yeah.
people's defense mechanism could come up, and they say, no, I don't have any concerns. They could actually say, even though they have concerns and or worries, but their survival brain will get activated with the why questions, and so the conversation will not be productive or
Mm-hmm.
open, and the manager will not get good data.
Right.
And then some people wonder, people are not telling me the truth. That could be one of the reasons if the manager is asking a lot of why questions, especially with an irritated tone rather than
Mm-hmm.
with a sense of curiosity and openness.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. Do you think it's worth role playing, showing what this could look like?
Let's do it. Let's give it a try.
Hey, Chris here. I really appreciate you listening to this podcast. And if you are listening to this podcast because you're looking to get better at these difficult conversations, well, if you really want to de escalate difficult behaviors and you want to be assertive without being aggressive and being true to yourself, I have a self paced course that can really help you because I know it's difficult being assertive in lots of different situations. If you're at work and you have to give feedback, if you have to deliver bad news to an employee, or deliver bad news to somebody that you care about in your personal life, or you're struggling to deal with defensive or sensitive people who are pushing your buttons and you don't know how to push back. It doesn't have to be that way. There is a world where you can handle these tough emotions with confidence. You can speak honestly and kindly while you're still being assertive. And you have the ability to manage emotional outbursts and stubbornness calmly, because these are things that I've had to overcome and learn. And so this self-paced course goes through all of those things. I've created this trust framework that helps you think through how to prepare for and how to facilitate hard conversations. And you hear a lot of it actually in this podcast as I talk about how to handle difficult conversations in lots of different scenarios. Currently, the course is closed for enrollment. There's a waiting list. If you are interested in learning more, enrollment will open up at the end of August and the beginning of September. So please go to the website. I'll link it down below and you can learn more about it and join the waiting list if you want to hear more about it. But I'd love to see you there. All right. So let's demonstrate what this could look like and how it could work. And so in this situation, I'll be the manager. Lucy, you'll be the employee. And let's say we're working at a company where previously all the eight, and this is the example we just kind of used earlier, but all the HR functions, if she needed to change an address, enter timesheets, request time off, do a performance evaluation, all that stuff was through either sending an email to HR or to me. But now it's a self-service system. It's changing to this so that she can do all this stuff by herself. She doesn't need to go to somebody else. but it does mean that she has to do more about she it's more work for her because she has to put her timesheets in, she has to enter her time off requests in that system and learn the system and all the things that come with it,
And
all the fun things that come with it.
I'm very overwhelmed and very resistant to change
Yeah,
because I already have so much to do.
yeah,
And
I
this
get
is
it.
one other thing to think about and to address and to learn. I already learned so much.
Well, let's
Can it
jump
be
into it. Let's see what
delayed?
happens. Yeah, let's see what happens.
Alrighty.
Hey, Lucy, how are you this Wednesday?
Chris, it's okay. I'm still dealing with a lot of change here and overwhelmed with the workload. It's so much. Thought it would be
I get it.
easier.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well,
So
listen, I
busy.
appreciate you. I hear you. You're overwhelmed. You got a lot of stuff going on, and I appreciate that you're still putting out high quality work. You're still doing a great job and everything. So I appreciate all of the stuff you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm really trying, but it's hard. I'm so tired
Hey,
to wake up
listen,
so early.
uh, listen. I hear that, and I hate to do this. Here's the
Oh,
thing. You
what?
know that you've been hearing some rumblings about some change in the company.
I was trying to
Um,
ignore it, hoping that it
yeah,
would be delayed.
I get it. Well, it's coming, and we can't ignore this anymore. Here's the thing: we are switching to a new HRIS system. So what that means is it's a new platform. It's called Paycom. We just are using this new system to do all the HR functions. So it's meant to be, we're rolling it out to everybody in the company October 1st. So I think everybody has like about a month to, a little over a
Just
month
a
to get
month.
used to it. But the thing is, all the stuff that you used to go to me for or go to, email HR for or call HR for, like, um, from what they tell me, you're supposed to be able to, change your email or mailing address on there, your personal information, update your marital status or benefits information on there directly. We're gonna all have to start putting our timesheets in there.
Yeah,
I
that
know
sounds
that's
like
not,
a lot.
I know that's definitely
I
new.
mean, that's gonna take so much time. And I
Yeah,
think, if I have to do all this admin work now myself, then it will be less time and energy for me actually to do a great job, which you hired me for.
yeah, yeah. I get it.
So
It's
I really, I that's gonna be a difficult for me. Plus I'm already taking another training right now, so I can do a really great job at what I'm doing. So this is like an additional change that it's the worst possible timing. Can we postpone it for another 6 months? Plus, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't have the power to postpone anything for the entire company. Just for our
Could we do
team.
exception at least?
Exception. Yeah, I wish. Here's the thing. I wish I could tell you everything would be better, everything will be great and easy. It's a new system for me too, so I'm learning it. So I'm hearing that you're feeling overwhelmed because you're already juggling a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
What el- you know, what other questions or concerns do you have so I can bring that back up to my boss?
Well, that's a great question. Thank you. Just another one. I know 2 years ago we already tried some new system and they said, oh, it's supposed to do all these cool things. And there were so many glitches and it took so much time. So my trust in this new system that, I fear it's going to be the same thing over again. We are trying it for a
Mm,
few months and it's just going to suck our time, energy, and then we have to go back to the old system anyway.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So how do we make sure I don't want to waste the company time. I don't want to waste my time. I like
right.
to be productive and this is just really frustrating. So I don't want that
Mm,
to happen again. To deal with some like any new system, there's gonna be glitches. And I remember the last time just yeah, I have somebody. When I ask them, I wait for like 2 days to get answer.
yeah, yeah. I appreciate that concern because I wasn't here 2 years ago, so I didn't know that they tried this already.
Yeah, that was nightmare.
Yeah.
So I don't want
So
to go there
yeah,
again.
it'd be helpful, it'd be helpful for me if you just, I don't want you to spend a ton of time on it because it's the past. If you could just spend a couple of minutes and write to me and write an email to me of like some of the things you remember, some of the glitches, Like I'm hearing like that there was hard to get some people to support you
Yeah.
and to get
The
help on that
training was
stuff.
horrible too. Like
The
nobody,
training
they
was
they just
horrible.
sent us like a manual to look for the answers there, but
Yeah.
like
So it sounds like you would feel more comfortable, number one, if there was somebody that was a live person that
yeah,
could help you answer questions or at least train you into
yeah.
understanding the system better.
Absolutely. Somebody that I understand that is patient and can explain it to me in a simple way, what I need
Okay.
to do, or when there is a challenge or glitch, to know that I can call somebody rather than messaging and getting connected to a robot that sends me a link to some article that I have to take
Okay.
additional time to read. I want to have somebody that can help me fix it right away if there's something like that. If I
Okay.
even consider some change
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah. Okay. Okay. I appreciate that. I'm writing that down. Yeah,
Thank you.
I think those are good questions. I think that's fair. And I'm gonna be learning it alongside with you. So I'm happy to, as much as I can understand it and help support you, I want to support you. There's a um there's a little webinar next week. And I can look at your calendar to see if you're free. It's just like a half hour to like give an introduction to the system. I'm wondering if you'd be interested just to come in with me and just check it out, just to see what it looks like, so that if you have any other questions or any other concerns, we can bring it up now because we still got time to think through and bring some of these things up.
This week, it's really busy with work. I'm still transitioning from the other assignment to the new assignment now.
Yeah,
Would it be okay if we just have a meeting and you can just share some bullet points with me? Would that work? Where we
yeah.
can actually talk about
If
it
it's
rather
okay
than
with you, I can
watch.
do that.
Yeah, I think that would work better for me.
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
I think it's before our next 1-to-1. So let's plan the meet at our next 1-to-1, and I'll go through that stuff. What they talk about.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Thank
All
you.
right. I
Thank you,
appreciate
Chris.
it. Thanks, Lucy.
Me too. Thanks.
All right.
Good job.
All right, Lucy. Thanks for pushing back. Um,
Thanks for being so supportive and
yeah.
understanding and empathetic.
Yeah. What are your thoughts? How do you think that went? What did I do well? What could I have done better?
So, what you did well, there were many things that you did well. One of the things I noticed, you also included yourself in that process. So, it wasn't just me being the one who is struggling with this, but you said we, both of us, are learning. Um, which felt I wasn't put on the spot. This is me who is gonna have the only person struggling with it. So it was helpful. Another thing, your tone of voice was calm. You weren't getting triggered, upset, irritated. If you were, you didn't show it. So kudos to you. You were also open and asking questions. So it seemed you really are coming from a perspective of really wanting to support me and understand what are my concern and addressing them. So I felt heard, I felt validated, I felt safe actually even to share what my concern is. And at the first one, I said, whatever. So I even at the first time, I even didn't share about that 2 years ago.
Hmm.
But actually, you ask additional question and made it really safe for me to open up. Um, Plus, you were taking notes, so it wasn't just dismissing what I'm saying, my concerns, but you said, yes, I'll make note of it and let's see how we can address that. So that felt very affirming and comforting from my perspective, which made me, okay, maybe this process won't be as, difficult, which made me help to start accepting it a little bit more. And the resistance was decreasing a little bit.
Hmm.
And you even had me, say yes to one step, which is talking about it next time.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
even didn't push that against it. So you had me commit actually to one next action, while it didn't feel that overwhelming. And you seemed also to be understanding of my situation, so I didn't feel like disrespected or not understood. So well done.
Yeah.
Any improvements? I'm thinking, I mean, you did share the next steps. Um, an alternative, I'm not saying that would be better. An alternative would be also addressing some expectations and the timeline. You've mentioned, it
Mm-hmm.
was beginning October, so we have a month. Now, within the month, would there be some additional steps? Then let's say by next week or in 2 weeks, we need to get done at least, you know, this portion. Is it the next payroll? I need to do additional training,
Yeah,
maybe some more
yeah.
information as an alternative, like, or asking me like, what else would make it easier for you, that process.
Mm-hmm.
There's just some alternative questions that I can think of right now. How was it for you when I was resisting? What came up?
Realistic is the word I would use. Realistic and nicer than some of the pushback I've heard to different change initiatives. I mean, but definitely realistic. And, for our listeners and for yourself, we didn't talk ahead like what the underlying pushback was caused by. And there was a couple of things, right? Like there was that feeling overwhelmed, feeling, tired from all these different change initiatives, which is fair. That's a real thing. I always think there's always a deeper thing, an emotional thing that's causing it. And it's also there was that lack of support. You've done this before, so it's actually reminding you of a bad experience. And I think that's the bigger thing. Because if I had said, hey, a new change, you got to email this new email every day, and when you do, they give you $5,000 cash, you'd be like, I guess if I have to, all right, let's do it. You would
Give
like
me
there'd be
those
no
5,000.
right. You wouldn't. I always like that's the example I always tend to go to because it's something that's a clear value benefit that you're like, okay, I'll do that. That's easy. I'll
I
I'll
love
do
it.
anything you need me
Yeah.
to do for that. But it's
You would have my
reminding you,
buy-in.
right? But it's that it was really because you had a bad experience in the past, and that's why I want to know more about what that was in terms of the glitches, so I can know, even if I have the answer. Let's say I don't need to ask my manager. I wrote down your concerns, but let's say I already have all the answers, but I don't need to go through them and dispute them right now, especially when we have a little bit of time, right? Like I have like
Yeah.
a week at least to come back and say, hey, I talked to my manager about some of your concerns, and here's what blah blah blah. Um, maybe I have all the answers already, and that's okay. But now is not the time for me to dispute those concerns if I have time. I know somebody listening is going to say, well, what if I don't have time? What if it's like a new thing we have to do in like 2 weeks, and I can't afford to have them go back and forth on a lot.
Great
I
question.
would just ask your permission to say, hey, listen, let's bring up your concerns. Like I'd still ask you, what are your concerns? What issues do you foresee happening? And then I would ask permission, like, hey, listen, I know some of the answers to this already. Would it be okay if I shared some of these answers?
Love that.
And then I would start sharing through that and talk, and then having a dialogue. It's not just me lecturing you, like, hey, you're wrong because of this. It's more because it's more of a, hey, I know you're bringing this up, and this is what I understand of the new change. What are your thoughts on that? So it's as you mentioned at the beginning, it's always a dialogue.
No.
And I think that's the key is if we had gone into it further, or we had a follow-up role play or a session, I would have continued to have a dialogue about like, let's talk more about some of these concerns and what it means for you and what some of the answers could be. And they are. And so we'll dive deeper into those kind of things.
Makes sense. So what I'm hearing, keeping the communication open and continuous feedback loop in a way
Yeah.
open. And not just by email. I will send you email with the bullet points so you can read it, but actually let's discuss it in the meeting. So I think
Right.
that also makes a difference, having those face-to-face or, Zoom to Zoom communication.
Exactly. Because so much is lost, and then you don't get the tone, and
Yeah,
truthfully also you just don't get as good an answer on email.
true.
If it's a 20-page email, you're not going to read all that.
Oof. No.
It's a lot
Yeah,
faster for me to just tell you, or even if I just send you a 2-minute video would be a lot easier to
great idea.
digest than
True.
a 2-page
Email.
email.
Oof, God, yes. So even a 15-minute conversation or even 10-minute, 5-minute conversation is better than email sometimes.
Yep. Yep. When I was helping to lead a technology change, my old company, I met with some people and I would show them the system and walk them through the system. And by the end, all of them said, "This is a lot easier than I thought it would be. This is a lot more
I
straightforward."
love that.
And
Hmm.
I get if they did the training, and I think I did like group trainings or webinars on it first. And
Yeah.
I offered, like, if anybody wants to meet with me individually, I will meet with you and tell you how to do this and show you, walk you through every question you have. And a bunch of the people did reach out to me, and I reached out to some people who I knew would didn't want to reach out, but I knew that they would be kind of feeling some sort of way about this change.
Mhm.
And I was right, and they felt some sort of way. And I would bring it, and I would show them the system, and I'd walk them through it. I'd have them do it. Inevitably, it was much easier than they thought it would be, and they were like, "Great, I love it. Let's keep using this."
Fantastic. Kudos to you for being really supportive and at the same time keeping them accountable. And what I'm hearing, another strategy in a way, kind of showcasing, walking people through the process. But I wonder even the storytelling, sharing the success stories
Yeah,
of people adapting this technology. And I wonder if that could be also having help of some employees that maybe already embrace that change. You've mentioned not everybody went to ask you.
right,
So maybe
right.
there was somebody that's like, yeah, I got it. I wonder if that and that have a buy-in. They say, yes, I'm excited about this change. There could be employees like that. I wonder if there will be opportunity to leverage those employees and
Yeah.
have them support the other people too, as additional support
Well,
possible.
now you're going into change theory, right? Now this is just building that coalition of the willing, of people who have already embraced it. They're already the early adopters, and they're going to help you spread your message.
Mhm.
And it's useful, and people say that because it's useful. That's how it works. And there's always going to be those few people that refuse to do it no matter what.
True.
Um,
Yes.
and like we always talk about, if in a work situation, you got to be willing to hold people accountable to things, and
Mm.
you know, it's not mean, it's not micromanaging, but
Mm.
if you continue to allow people to not follow a standard, it just sends a message to everybody else on your team and to them that,
Absolutely.
that it's okay not to do what you're supposed to do, that you don't care. It just makes things worse.
So sounds like there's really if we start closing this, both sides to that change, and not only being curious and open and empathetic to how it is for the other people and how the process would work for them. What is their own process adapting change? What do they need
Mm-hmm.
for them to embrace it with more ease? What could be the obstacles and how can we support them to get through that process? But also being aware of our own states, our own biases, our own triggers,
Mm-hmm.
and being able to navigate our own emotional fitness in a way. So even change could be an opportunity for a manager to grow to the next level of leadership, possibly
Yep.
by really being aware of their own state as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
these situations will happen.
They're always
It's
going to
part of
happen.
the part of
Yeah.
any organization and life.
Yeah. And even you said it's the change, right? It's it's a lot of change, and in the role play, so there's a lot of different things going on. Like, I wish I could tell people that there's gonna be less change, but I think change is just ongoing forever. Things keep changing, so it's a part of that resiliency, and that not just resiliency, but also that grit to persevere through that as well.
They say what doesn't kill us make us stronger. So
Yeah,
and
I don't know if I don't agree
really
with that
like that one.
statement. I don't like that statement, but
Let's rephrase that then. So any change is an opportunity for us to practice our resilience to grow.
that makes more sense. I
A little
also
bit
like. Have
more
you ever heard the
gentler.
one change is mandatory, growth is optional?
Oh, I like that one.
I wish I could
I'm
remember who
gonna
said
keep
it. It
that
was
one.
somebody, some
That's a good one.
well-known expert said that.
I love that. Oh, well, thank you to all of you that are watching us or listening because seems like you are committed to your growth and you're taking
Absolutely.
that option.
Yeah. And if I will say if you could take anything away from this is if somebody pushes back, just ask more questions to understand why,
But
right?
ask what questions?
Ask what, right? You want to understand why, but you're not asking why, but you're understanding, right? It's if
Yes.
I had just if I had just left with Lucy is overwhelmed in that role play, I would have just focused on how do we get stuff off your plate, which I actually that's another story that you should think about too as a manager. But I would have focused on that. I would have focused on like micromanaging her schedule of how do we take stuff off your plate? How do I take some of your tasks so you can do this? But that's not the real issue. She's
Yeah.
feeling burned and upset by previous attempts, and she's still scarred a little bit from that. So
Mm.
she wants to make sure that she wants to feel safe that this is going to be permanent and going to be okay for her, and she's going to feel supported
Yes.
through it.
Well
But ask
done.
questions, ask good questions.
And when we talk about asking questions, please feel free to also ask us any questions. Any additional roleplay scenarios that you would like us to roleplay, please let us know. Ask us questions too.
Yeah. So, like, subscribe, comment, let us know what you think. Give us a review if you've been listening. If you've been listening for any amount of time, please give us a review. That's always helpful.
We
I
love
think you hear,
feedback.
yeah, we love feedback, but also that's just the name of the game in the world we live in with the
True.
algorithms.
That's true. If you want other people to learn to communicate better, please do share our
Yeah,
resources so all of us can have easier time to communicate with others and be happier and have better lives as
yeah,
a result.
yeah. Well, Lucy, thanks very much. It was great.
Thank you, Chris. I'll see you next time.
See you next time. See everybody next week.
See everybody. Bye.